Everybody. Still in pain. um, so I'm going to be changing it up a little bit. I did kind of have half a mind of doing um, Cyberpunk tonight, but it's also been a bit of a rough day in terms of the arm. I think probably I'm getting to that point where I start feeling a little bit more comfortable with it, and that's translating into me bumping the part that shouldn't be bumped very frequently. So I'm going to hop into Tyranny, which of course means 3 weeks in a row of that. But I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either. This is a pretty decent game, and I've been reasonably pleased with how people have engaged with it. So I one thing I've actually always had a little bit of a tough call in terms of games like this because, in one sense, they're very good for being able to do the types of reading that I think people seem to like about the stream. And that's obviously a plus for me. But on the other hand, I'm not entirely sure I have. Um, I don't know. Like, I don't really feel like I have that much that I can say about. I guess I've said a little bit about the setting, but in terms of Cyrus the Great, in terms of I think I talk about this a little bit more as it relates to other games like this that I've played or that I want to play than I do the actual setting, which is a bit different from some of the things I liked about Cyberpunk, which was for, especially at the start, getting a chance to talk about the genre and, the what the game seems to be doing, either in terms of a reference back to some of the earlier material or the or doing something new. Whereas here, I'm talking about it as a game, but I don't really have a whole lot to talk about the setting other than how much I like it. But I mean, there's no shortage of dialogue, and that was always the thing I was a little worried about, which is I think the tendency for games like this is to just go through systematically all the dialogue options. I think there's a couple of games that actually try and discourage you from doing that, but in general, I tend to find my inclination usually is to exhaust all the dialogue options. And I find that interesting, and I find it's a chance for me to be able to talk, which seems to be sort of the selling point of the stream. But on the other hand, I don't know if that's something that people, I don't know, like about the game. Like at some point, presumably people will want to see they'll want to see the gameplay. So, anyways, we spent about 45 minutes in dialogue with Barrick. So the plan was to do at least one interaction with another character. I think what I'll probably wind up doing is talking with Lantry, and then we'll maybe catch up with Verse, but Verse we're not going to need to go all the way with the dialogue trees. And it would be nice to be able to talk with Ebb as well, but I don't know if she has to be in the party for that or not. In addition, the weight of the Aegis. Barrick wants to know if there's any way he can be freed from his armored prison. Barrick wishes to discuss something with you. Talk to him to find out what's on his mind. Now that's interesting because we actually did just talk to him. And Stirring Visions. Whatever you did in Ascension Hall in Vendrian's Well has given you the power to interact with the Spire. Before you ascended the Spire, you had a vision when the edict broke. Understanding this vision might help you better grasp this new power that you have acquired. How's it going, Mazoabi? Yes, I will try and talk with Eb. The teleporter that brought you to the top of the mountain spire at Vendrian's Well has shut off and left you stranded atop the pillar. Perhaps this strange device at its center might hold the key to activating it once again. So I don't know if the biography updates. Yeah, I'm going to stick with my plans here. So let's start with Lantry.
At least in theory, I'm supposed to be observing history and not getting myself wrapped into it. All the same, this is the thrill of a lifetime. Rarely does one stand so close to monumental moments in the making. If given the choice between a multifaceted hive mind of treachery and a surly old soldier, General Grumps is the wiser choice. It's patently obvious which Archon is truly loyal to Kairos. So, I must ask, are you planning on taking sides in the Civil War? Or do you have other plans?
I'm a servant of the Archon of Justice. That much has not changed.
Dutifully spoken. It is Tunon's duty to arbitrate matters between the Archons, so this rift between Ash and Narat certainly falls under his jurisdiction. And here you are, thrust in the middle of the dispute. No doubt the mighty adjudicator will be relying heavily on you to get to the truth of the matter. Whatever you do next, consider that many eyes will be upon you, for you have both delivered and taken away the Overlord's edicts, and few will know how to make sense of the latter. You are an exception the Archons cannot afford to ignore. They will likely aim to control or destroy you.
I mean, we satisfied the edict. I don't know if it was broken, but have you heard of edicts being broken before?
Most of Kairos' edicts were either worded to end in a manner of the Overlord's choosing, or the edicts have simply continued in perpetuity. That's not to say there haven't been stories of broken edicts. They're just uncommon.
How's it going in Dixnome?
The oldest is, I think, Golbraith and the Edict of Sorrows, and that tale dates back to around the year 110. Aside from you, the most recent was the Edict of Twisting Grasses, back in 380. In all these stories, Kairos' edict very clearly gives its victim a single way to escape, and someone manages it. What's never happened is the pure abatement of an edict, like using a spell of warding or cancellation.
Have a moment? Let's talk further. Sorry, I've got some almonds here, so that's probably gonna ruin the audio for a bit. Just 1 second. Oh yeah, could you tell us how that's going? It was Space Pirates where I didn't have the most original suggestion to just start hitting people with furniture. Sorry, nuts really don't make a good streaming snack. Okay, have a moment. Let's talk further. So what's on your mind? Did you want to discuss matters of the present, or would you prefer a more scholarly rant? Let's discuss current matters.
Of course. How can I help?
Know anything about the region we're in?
The Spires predate us all. As far as I know, we're the only ones who've been up here since... ever? I think this might be a first. Perhaps the real Trailblazer had trouble getting down and was lost to history. Of course. How can I help? The Spires... Of course. How can I help?
What are your thoughts on our traveling associates?
Are you asking for an objective assessment? Or is this your way of saying you want to gossip?
Barrick, what do you make of him?
He is a proper Northman, with duty in his blood, which makes me suspect his loyalty to Ash is stronger than his loyalty to you. As long as your interests remain aligned to Graven Ash, this shouldn't be an issue.
Right now you're working on a map for it. More specifically, you're making icons for the map. So actually, if you don't mind unpacking this a little bit in Dixnome, I think I'm cursed or possibly blessed with interest in some of the most, not irrelevant, but definitely I'd say maybe unconventional parts of development. So you're talking about making a map, and I know you sort of have a background in terms of project management and such, and of course software development. So I'm a little curious, like, is your choice to work on a map, is this, you're doing something that you're interested in, which obviously is a great way for recreational projects, at least in terms of my case, although mine usually are smaller than a full-on game? Or when you do these projects, like, do you sort of scope them out as something that you would normally be working on, and you happen to be on the map part. I think it's also because one of the things I used to, when I worked on the, it was the, oh heavens, the toilet paper game, Supply Chain. One of the things that I really wanted to do, and I think the person I was collaborating with already wanted to do this, so it wasn't exactly an innovation or that, but I really wanted to include graphs because, of course, having a visualization of what you've done in the game is, to me, sort of the payoff, the same way that, you know, you'd see that in something like a SimCity, City Skylines. RimWorld has something like that. Actually, I also think Civilization, you know, you get the option of watching the history play out, which I think is a nice touch. So in those senses, those are all, I mean, the Civilization example is specifically a map. But so, like, to me, that would be one of the things that I think is the most appealing. And then I also sort of think if you like doing sort of secondary creation, the idea of building out these worlds and sort of filling them with things. I think for a lot of people who like writing a certain type of literature, they also like, you know, drawing out the maps and such. But I'm just kind of curious where that sits in your overall world domination scheme.
I must admit, I am completely fascinated by his predicament. Ever tried diagramming the articulations of his armor? Don't. It'll only lead to madness and ruination.
Thoughts on verse?
I know little of swordplay, and couldn't work a curve and arrow to save my life. I can't really comment on the lady.
Lady? You're just afraid to talk in front of me, clear as day. Your sweat is easier to read than your ink scribbles.
No, not at all. I just don't know how to comment on a warrior's worth, that's all.
Spare me your blather.
Verse pauses to read Lantry's body language.
Huh. Think that, do you? Didn't know you had such swollen hope for me.
No need to keep secrets, Lantry.
A most fascinating specimen. I think she has great potential. A dangerous amount of potential, to be blunt. The Scarlet Furies are the fighting elite of the Scarlet Chorus, and that means floating to the top of a sea of blood and chum. We should consider ourselves lucky to have her on our side, with her weapons usually pointed away from us.
What do you make of Ebb?
Good tidecasters stay underwater. Kairos did the Tears a favor by erasing those moon howlers from history. A shame one of them escaped justice.
I like that I make you this agitated. Considering all the things that don't seem to bother you in the slightest. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of getting off on how much power you're giving me here.
Oh. And then there's your coquettish act whenever someone calls you on your teeth. I'll be the one ready to tangle when, not if, you decide to pounce.
Let's speak of something else. I have some questions for you.
I am nothing if not a semi-reliable font of knowledge. What did you want to discuss?
I'd like to know more about you. Me? Well, fine, but I'm not a very fascinating subject. I study interesting people, enough to know that I'm not one of them. What's your story? Tell me about the origins of Lantry. Someday, someone half your age will ask you to sum up your life, and you'll realize what an odious request that is. Well, where to start? I grew up in Sunder. I was born right after independence from the realm of Stalwart, so yeah, do the math and you'll realize I'm old. My parents were harbor hands. My mother never returned from a voyage, and my father lost his hand to infection and decided to sell me to the School of Ink and Quills. In a treaty that ended with the firm stipulation that Sunder chose to leave and Stalwart did not lose a civil... In a treaty that ended with the firm stipulation that Sunder chose to leave and that Stalwart did not lose a civil war, the free city of Sunder marks 347 TR as its year of independence. He's pretty spry for 84. So when they sold you, how much were you worth? 3 bronze rings, or so I remember it. Not that the sum is burned into my mind or anything. As a novice, I was assigned to the dovecotes, where I learned how to raise and groom birds to carry missives, and most of my early tomes were on that subject. 10 years and several tomes later, someone decided I was ready to be welcome into the inner circle and shown the ways of magic. And since then, I've spent a great deal of time in field study, which I suppose readied me for life after the fall of the Vellum Citadel. Well, much as anything could really for one of the strangeness of these days. As much as anything could ready one for the strangeness of these days. Were you born Lantry, or did you take that name on joining the School of Ink and Quill? Most sages take a new name when they join the school, but for me, the transition was difficult at first. I stuck to my old commoner name and just never got around to picking some highfalutin name like Sage Apophasis, or Sage Dangling Participle. Is this your true skin? Is this your true scheme? Did you always want to be a sage? I cannot imagine doing anything different. I suppose in my youngest days I yearned for battle and glory like most of the boys I knew. Having now seen how short a soldier's life can be, I look back on that old calling, that old mindset, and laugh. So really, what's your story? What do you mean by that? I don't have enough fear. I know you're smarter than you act. Extend me the same courtesy. Lantry strokes his beard, leaving flecks of sepia among the white whiskers. I was on the take from the voices of Nerat. At least an agent of his sent me to the School of Ink and Quill 30 years back. It'd be years later until I made the connection to the Archon. Most people think the war began 3 years ago, but the voices of Nerat had his hands in things sooner than that. I was part of that early invasion, an eager kid happy to accept a 30-year assignment that comes with an education. Index Gnome shares, I have made notes for the game, what I need to make or reuse from older projects. I could just use old icons, but one of the reasons why I start with the map early is that you like to quickly see progress in the project, so I often start with the game world. It also gives my imagination to wander. If it had been a pure strategy game, generating random maps would be good, but this is more of a story, so I need to control the world. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's part of, I guess to a certain extent, it's almost like asking where do ideas come from, but I'm always really interested in project structures, even like either independent projects that are done solo or also with teams. And I think that's partly because I've been on a big kick on like productivity in terms of gaming and sort of really feeling that that is an engine through which a game can sort of succeed or fail, I guess. Like this is maybe not the best example that I'll give, but I'll give an example from Tyranny here. So, the context for this game is that Pillars of Eternity was very successful. Obsidian was reuniting with the publisher for Pillars of Eternity, Paradox Interactive. And there really seems to be an appetite for these kinds of games. So if you look at the credits, there's a fair... How you doing, Vanguard Master? There's a fairly sizable group that worked on this. And this very nice soundtrack that you're listening to, I believe, was recorded with a proper orchestra, which of course implies a certain budget. Now, with that in mind, that budget also implies a certain price point. Indeed. In fact, Index Gnome is talking a bit about the structure of his current project. So I don't know if that's of interest to you or not, but probably I can let him explain. But yeah, so the I really like the music. I've kind of talked about how the Spire song in particular is a favorite of mine. It's something that I really enjoy. And in fact, it's I think if you have the deluxe edition of the game, you get sort of the full soundtrack. And I'll also say, too, this is also one of the things that I think if you make games, particularly if you compose music for games, this is something that you kind of really want to do. So I have a composer friend who talks about how they would really like to do a recording with a live orchestra, but the budget can almost never justify that step. And I talked to I've talked to more than one person. A lot of people are like, oh, the samples are so good now, you don't need an orchestra. And I'm like, yeah, you can listen to the guy's music on its own and you will know that it is not suffering for, well, okay, I should be careful in saying that. The music sounds great, right? It sounds like Hollywood. But when when a creator like that says it would be wonderful to do this with a live orchestra, I have a complete understanding of why they want that and why it makes. Yeah, just use AI for the music. Exactly. Like, it's somewhat comparable to that. I think it's one of these things here where, I don't want to just reduce it down to the pickiness of people who are in the know. I think there is genuinely a benefit that comes from something like a live orchestra. But there is definitely a trade-off in terms of the money that you spend and the value that it brings to the project. And so in this example here with Tyranny, this was not necessarily a game that was sort of successful by the standards that I think Paradox was looking for. At the very least, that's what I got from the interviews. I think they sort of said that, eventually it would sort of break even, but movie studios don't make movies so that they can break even. They make it so that they can get a return on the investment better than what the alternatives would have been. So, the challenge here, right, would be that, Tyranny needs to justify its price tag. And the more you spend making the game, the higher that price tag needs to be. And there's some give and take, right? There's the money that you spend, and that will create a certain quality of product, which of course commands a certain price. But on the other hand, the difference between what you sell it for and the cost of selling it will be your profit. Or, well, I mean, per unit, it's a little hard, but total revenue minus the total cost will be your profit is maybe the better way of thinking of that. And clearly in this case, if Tyranny is, I don't have very many nice things to say about Paradox. But we definitely need to acknowledge the groups behind. We kind of need to acknowledge the people behind the title. I'm not at the point where I want to not even say the name. But yeah, I guess the big thing that I would sort of say out of this, right, is that you sort of ask that question, like, if you could go back, right, if you could get a not comparable, because I think the idea here is that a live orchestra and sampling, will never be the same thing. But, it is the marginal reduction, greater than the money you would save from not having a live orchestra. And, could that have lowered the unit price of the game? Or alternatively, could you have sold the game at the same price and, not have lost that many people? Because, I mean, I don't want to be unkind to the music, right? But the music is something that's enhancing all of those sort of core features of the game. And of course, I think given some of the comments on the ending, I think the most common thing I'll hear is like the ending feels rushed. It sort of suggests to me that maybe, the soundtrack isn't going to be the thing that will overcome that more core issue that some people had. And then of course you can say, maybe those resources could have bought some more time, probably less likely for more time, because then you have, exchanges with the publisher and the marketing plans and so on and so forth. But this is the thing, right? Like, productivity is essentially, to me, one of the biggest things about productivity in terms of gaming is the fact, like, my perspective of it will basically be, to use it almost the term interchangeably with technological improvement. And the idea about technological improvement would be less like getting computers. I think everybody can kind of get that video games are made with computers, but more like the root word, techne, the way of doing things, and sort of the arrangement of all of the factors of production to produce a certain type of outcome. Oh, that's really interesting, Index Gnome. I had no idea that you turned it off. Yeah, so obviously in this case, like, spending for a live orchestra is meaningless for an audience of people like yourself, because it'll be turned off. And obviously, for a bunch of games that pay for some expensive music, if they don't pay for the licensing rights to play it, they're cutting the game off from streamers. So that's another potential another potential problem. But anyways, this idea of technological improvement is more the idea of how do you come up with a way of arranging your all of the factors that you have, all of your elements, in a way that allows you to produce, the same or more for less cost. So an example of this would be the tendency for a lot of indies for a while to go for roguelikes and procedurally generated levels. Because, of course, you do not need to spend the time handcrafting these levels. You don't need to spend the time, tuning each individual component. What you do instead is you create a set of instructions to make levels within certain parameters. And I'm not at all implying that that is a quote-unquote easy task. But if you happen to have some pretty good, coding mavens and people with some good taste in terms of being able to understand what parameters will produce, a minimal or ideally zero number of sort of bad runs and sort of a maximum number of satisfying runs, then you can sort of see how you get sort of this near infinite number of levels. And so, of course, that enhances replayability, which, of course, enhances the idea of more value for your dollar, right? So this is sort of like the RimWorld approach, where technically RimWorld doesn't have much of a story. There's obviously a setting that's been established for it, and yet there are so many stories that people tell out of their individual runs, quite specifically because the game is tailored to have certain events happen at certain moments and give you these sort of pushes and pulls of overall progress inside the game. And I'm definitely finding that as I play the game on permadeath mode. So, and there's lots of different versions of this story, right? Like, do you use the Unity store or the Unreal store to, to fill in some gaps of your production process? Or do you really insist on sort of having, everything made custom? Clearly, there's going to be a certain benefit that comes from every last, blade of grass and tree being custom made by your team, but not every game is going to merit that kind of detail. And of course, every hour you spend on that is going to need to be paid in some form of salary or something like that. So, the problem here is that this is sort of, there's lots of different dimensions and there's a lot of interactions between things. So I'll be bold in the sense of, chat here. I've got the sort of two most talkative people in the chat talking about how they don't play games with music. But I'll go so far as to say that, I'd say there is a non-zero value to music, but what the limit for music is, either as a percentage of budget or dollars spent, I'm going to guess that if a game has a $100 million music budget, it's probably not going to, that is a game that had better be spending considerably more on all the other factors and essentially kind of set itself up as the sort of game that is going to be like on literally every gaming system, including like mobile devices. But yeah, in the end, these are creative endeavors, right? So even you can't just simply reduce it down to an accounting exercise. And yet on the other hand, there's very clearly some decisions that are being made which will be tied in some small way to the game's overall success. And then, it's a little bit easier after the fact when you see that the game maybe didn't perform equal to expectations. You can start looking at how you could reallocate the budget in different ways. But I don't know, like as a sort of systems point of view, like I would not want every producer to be kind of reading the menu right to left and saying, no video game will have a live orchestra recording the music. Like that would be a real shame. I feel that we would be missing out on something there. So Index says, pay 10 students to create the same logo. Pick the best one rather than hiring one artist with 30 years experience. That's how you save money, assuming you have taste. No, that's a really good one. I mean, that's I do sort of some silly AI generated art stuff, which I realize, I lose like 7 followers every time I say stuff like that. But for me, the most of the time that I will hear from people saying, oh, how did you do that? It's usually because I've had lots of different iterations on sort of the same thing. And what I've done is I've sort of taken a combination of different images that sort of have this very cohesive style and structure and arranged them in a way not unlike the way that I do photography, right? I definitely don't put every photo I've ever taken inside of my portfolio, as it were. I usually take the very few that I think really deliver on conveying an idea or a certain value. And, the fact that, I mean, just the same way as I'm not running down to each individual, grain and giving it a specific light value, I'm sort of acknowledging that there is a part, in this case more so the computer than what, the lighting of the day and my proximity to the subject and a few other factors. I'm just accepting that there's a different set of parameters that I have mild to zero control over, and sort of instead working on with that constraint and trying to make something interesting out of it. Done this many times. You go to a local uni and put up a note, a contest to create something. The winner gets paid. The rest is experience. Calling the union on you. Actually, you might be interested in dark web streamer. I've actually wound up with the lead on this, Chantal Ryan, I think. I've talked about this a couple of times, and it's actually a really tough conversation, because I will get back to the game after this, but one of the hardest things for me to talk about is how I got into movies, because it's one that really runs counter to a lot of the talk about sort of unions. Like there's a style of discussion about unions which sort of makes them a bit of a silver bullet. And I wish I was more into union. Like, I wish I could be basically have more of the popular take on unions. But the thing is that depending on the conversation, it's one that's not always the appropriate answer. So in my particular experience, the trainee program for camera was closed. And you have the old problem, right? You can't get the job without experience. You can't get experience without the job. And so I worked for free on a lot of things. And in fact, I worked so long for free. And when I got paid gigs, I'd often be kicked off of them as soon as the union found out, because I wasn't in the union. And, eventually they did open up the program, and I did have some experience that I could speak to get in. But, unions exist largely to put constraints on the labor market to drive up the price, which, is good for the union, technically bad for the employer in the sense that they need to pay more. I think there can be very productive exchanges with unions and employers. And in fact, I do think that they do solve a certain problem, which is, of course, that there's a certain amount of negotiating power that an employer will have relative to an individual, an individual worker. But there's plenty of historical examples of too much power in the hands of the companies, and then you also can sort of see what it looks like when the unions have too much power. Like there's the stuff that led to Margaret Thatcher getting elected was definitely an example of an economy that was really a basket case because you just couldn't get anything done. So, again, this is going to be a much bigger topic than I can reasonably handle in this particular segment of the stream. But, I will say most jobs I've had do in fact have a union, and I've benefited from that. So I really can't be one of the stereotypical econ guys and say that unions are bad. I also don't think, like, when I say stereotypical econ guy, I actually don't think that that's really a default economist's position. I think in general, you'd probably just you'd want to ask a more specific question. But, games tend not to have as many unions. That's sort of changing now, but like not as widely. And I've talked with Chantal specifically about this, and she said, there are cases where I would, I think she's actually restricted. I believe she cannot use volunteer labor on this project because there's a government grant. And she's also pointed out that there are examples of people who are interested in helping the project, but ultimately they are priced out of the market because, to a certain extent, like, if you have somebody who's sufficiently green, it's actually a drag on the production to even have a volunteer. And in some situations, right, the thing that is, people are actually getting something out of the experience, and there is some value in bringing them into the group. But in the end, like, you would effectively not be paying them minimum wage. And again, this results in some sort of a weird situation. And I'll tell you, like, as this is never, nobody, you never win friends when you say this, but I will say for myself, like, I personally benefited from working for free. I worked incredibly hard prior to making money in movies. I can't even say that that was a bad thing, but I will definitely say that was a direct result of there being a union. And, you know, in the end, I think people kind of need to decide where they, you know, how they feel about that, where they fall on the overall sorry, just got spam. Again, that's going to be an individual decision. I just think it's better to have sort of an honest discussion about that. But it was actually very interested. So I definitely know that Chantel's politics are definitely more liberal than mine, and I'm not going to try and suggest I'm remotely close. I'm a radical centrist at worst. But it was very interesting to hear someone who you would normally associate with a particular set of views in terms of, you know, organization and such. But it was kind of refreshing to hear someone say, it's like, yeah, you know, it's a crummy situation, and, you know, it's nice to have this ideal that everybody should sort of be paid for this kind of work. But on the other hand, right, like, I think it's just nice that someone who is actually doing an interesting project that people are like, I wish I was doing that, is honest to say that, you know, a lot of people who are volunteering their efforts are actually taking away from a project, first of all. I've heard this so many times, like, when I talk about, like, a perfect example here would be like traveling at night, right? I cannot tell you the number of streamers that have come in finding out that there's a CRPG and they're like, oh, I should offer to voice act for free. It's like, I don't want to speak for Weather Factor. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're going to want to pay the people. It's like, I'm saying I'm offering it for free. It's like, yeah, but, like, that doesn't mean that that's a good thing, right? Like, you know, it may be creating a liability for them. It may not fit. You know, it's like, I don't want to discourage people from pursuing a dream, but, like, if I were to walk up to a person on the street with, like, a French press as they're walking into a coffee shop and, like, pour them a cup of coffee and say, here you go, it's free. And they're like, no, thanks, I'm going to go in there. And then I'm like, really insistent, no, it's free. That is not going to encourage them anymore, right? The insistence itself actually will be the detriment. Well, I mean, I could be completely benign, right? I could just be trying to improve my barista account, or maybe I'm trying a new roast to see how people like it, right? There's any number of things. I mean, just go on Steam, right? You have like 1,000 games that are roughly this equivalent, right? Where it's like, it's only 99 cents. What, you don't have 99 cents? Come on, it's 99 cents. What do you got to lose? But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's refreshing to hear the perspective that says, again, I don't want to speak for Chantel, but it's nice to hear from someone to say, effectively acknowledge the fact that there is an ideal that we have in terms of how the labor is organized inside of projects and broader in the industry. while also recognizing that some of the ideals that people who have experience and are inside, some of the ideals that they're holding up actually do carry certain costs for people who are trying to get that experience. And I'm sure I kind of sound a bit shifty in trying to avoid hitting a particular conclusion on that, because maybe, I mean, in the end, I'm not a practitioner, so I don't necessarily think that I should be dictating to people what they should be paying their workers and when they should be paying those workers. But I think the idea of just sort of sweeping it under the rug to say that, you know, the thing that enables the union to be effective is also the thing that will actually make it harder for students to get work experience. It would be nice to just have a bit more of an acknowledgement of that, right? Because I also think the people who are very strong on unions are also very, you know, strong on student loans and things like that. And it's like, well, if you want to create a situation in which a lot of people have gaming degrees and no career to speak of to pay those, you know, those loans off, probably it's one where you have very strong unions that are constraining the, you know, the number of gaming positions, right? So, Index says, I love unions myself. Think all your employees are in a union at the moment. I cannot make a profit without cannibalizing the workers. I'm just a bad businessman. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I personally think that there are lots of, I also just think there's enough historical examples of companies being able to work well to make, you know, make a profit, pay their shareholders back, pay a dividend, that treat its employees well, with a union or without. But there's definitely a lot of schools that are doing that are doing specifically gaming vocational training. Also, welcome Revive Snow, lovely fellow Canadian broadcaster, voiceless, camless, and I've been particularly enjoying a lot of streams that involve more relaxed or strategic games, but that actually would be amazing if the degrees were so fine-grained in specific genres. A Master of RTS is about probably as useful as like a Master's in Homeopathy or something. I love RTS. I'm just acknowledging that is not really a genre that's been, you know, that's been generating a lot of wealth. But maybe you break the curse, Revive Snow. I believe in you. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of these things. I think that I'm a little more indifferent as to the specific form that it takes. But I feel that these conversations would be a lot more useful if people had a more honest discussion about the trade-offs involved, and you know, the I think one of the challenges is that very often, I think this just comes a lot of the time because people tend to engage in bad faith in these cases where, you know, sometimes it'll be, I'm just asking questions, or we just need to consider all the facts or whatever. And it's almost kind of like this delaying tactic to avoid actually engaging with the idea. And I'm definitely not interested in doing something like that. But, you know, I also think we benefit from sort of understanding, in this case, the labor market for gaming and the consequences of, you know, you know, unionization. And in the end, right, that's the way how you potentially address some of those challenges in terms of being able to integrate new talent into the industry. You definitely don't want to create a situation in which people are unable to do good work because one particular segment happens to be vocal and is in the leadership. Well, see, the joke about the PhD thing is that if it's the master's, it's not, you don't get the opportunity. Like, you can't even necessarily become a professor. You know, jokes are not funny when you explain them. So, most people think the war began 3 years ago, but the Voices of Nerat had his hands in things sooner than that. And I was part of the early invasion, an eager kid happy to accept a 30-year assignment that comes with an education. What else aren't you telling me? You read the Edict of Fire. You were the messenger of Kairos' judgment of my work. It was about then that I decided I'd need to take an interest in your scheme. In truth, I'm deeply curious about any who have lived as vessels of Kairos' most supreme magic. When I heard that you were proclaiming a second edict, I had to find a way for us to meet. Being tied up in a prisoner camp was not the intended plan. So you advocating surrender to Kairos. So you advocating surrender to Kairos was the end of your long plan? Yes and no. When I first left, I was just happy to be getting educated by the sages on someone else's rings, and my orders were simply to listen and report. As the time drew near, my commands were to win them over, a little at a time, to the notion of surrender. But I failed. The elders of the school grew defiant, and the militant minds won out. These are tearsmen, after all. I didn't deliver the surrender, and it took the Overlord's edict to end what I was sent to do. Thank you for telling me. Now, no more secrets, understood? I will endeavor to earn your trust as best I can. Sorry to have given you reason for doubt. Let's speak of something else. Me? Well, fine. I'm not a very fascinating subject. I study interesting people, enough to know that I'm not one of them. How do you feel about Kairos? How can I not help but find him to be the most captivating person alive? The man has bent empires, claimed continents. Where he goes, history follows. I won't deny he's killed millions, at least, but I contend more would have died in petty wars across Terratus in the void of Kairos. I've seen what tiny despots, merchant cabals, and mage guilds can inflict in the names of all sorts of righteous causes. I'll take the rule of Kairos over the tyranny of every idiot on Terratus. Let's speak of something else.
I am nothing if not a semi-reliable font of knowledge. What did you want to discuss?
I'd like to discuss arcane matters.
And I'd be happy to oblige. Ever since the fall of the Vellum Citadel, it is hard to find someone with whom I can discuss such things.
What do you know of Kairos' edicts? Kairos has cast many over the ages, and to my knowledge has never worded two edicts exactly the same. Edicts defy our understanding of magic. Kairos' magic words over vast distances, over infinite durations, and no archon or mere mage can counter with the force of an edict. What can you tell of edicts in general? I explain it to my students like this. A spell is to an edict as a drop of rain is to a hurricane. Edicts and spells are both magical cantrips, but differ in intensity by orders of magnitude. Edicts are almost commands to Terratus that must be carried out until the instructions allow for the magic to end. If Kairos wants a plague until next Judge's Day, expect copious buboes until next Judge's Day. One day you want to make a geopolitical simulator type game, but the work just to simulate the economy of the game is insane. Yeah, I mean, there are some games that do make a nice effort of this. So I think Positech Games, it's Democracy, I think. You know, they kind of have almost this neural net, and there's sort of things that sort of feed into others. So at the very least, you kind of have these loops. But I mean, the whole thing, like, there's an entire discipline of economics, and very often, if you actually try to calculate general equilibrium, it is the thing. If there is one thing that always got my micro professors just like swearing in a heap, it would be trying to solve for general equilibrium. It's just mind-numbingly complicated. So you can do what most economists do. Very often you will focus on a problem, and you're sort of dealing with a model that allows you to abstract away parts that are not necessarily relevant, or things where you can get by and you can kind of get to the essence of what you want to talk about. But the fact of the matter is, like, sometimes you really do need a good understanding of what's going to happen, and when you do that, you are looking at some pretty complicated ideas. Like, actually, a really good example of this would be I'm just looking at my bookshelf over here. So, like, some of the things that you could do to try and model an economy. So there's definitely I think there's a good understanding today that a lot of good macro is sort of micro founded. So if you want a good foundation in microeconomics, the The one that like every PhD has read is Mascolet, Winton and Green, Microeconomic Theory. David Krebs, it's supposed to be a 3-volume work, but there's only 2 volumes out right now. Microeconomic Foundations, volumes 1 and 2. So look at those. Make sure that you, like, not just that you can read those texts, but when you do the exercises, you can solve them, right? That your eyes aren't just going over the equations, but you understand why those equations make sense and why, why they lead to certain conclusions. And then when you want to simulate an economy in a game, the ones that you can probably go, so if you had to have one textbook, probably Recursive Microeconomic Theory by Lars Lundqvist and Thomas Sargent. I think that's currently in its 4th edition. It's a pretty beefy tome. And if you're allowed a second or third, so if you want the heavy mathy one, Recursive Methods in Economic Dynamics by Stokey, Lucas, and Prescott. That one's a little bit more theory. But if you wanted maybe just to focus on growth, Darren Asimoglu's got a great textbook, Introduction to Modern Economic Growth. But, even just limiting it to, like, let's say the Mascolet and the Lundqvist and Sargent book. So first of all, those are 2 like very large textbooks. That doesn't take you to the frontier, right? That's I'm in a PhD program and I want to understand, some basic models to work with. And I know for some people that will already take them to their, to their limits. Now, there are some people who will just sort of say, this is masturbation. Like, this is not, like, this is just a bunch of people who kind of wish that they were physics, physics PhDs, but they had to settle for economics. Another one, actually, if you kind of want to see the difference, like, you could sort of look at an introductory trade textbook. So, like Paul Krugman is a co-author on one called International Microeconomics. And then you can compare the simple models inside of that. That's an undergraduate textbook. And then I think it's Martin Uribe and Stephanie Schmidt-Groh. There's a textbook by those two. Both of their textbooks are printed by Princeton, but there's an undergraduate one that they have and a graduate one. I think the graduate one is called Open Economy Macroeconomics. And again, you have this idea that, you open up an economy and you open up multiple economies, and then some of them are large economies, some of them are small economies, and the problems get really hard again. And, I'm not going to suggest that these are impossible problems to deal with. Like, we have central banks. Those central banks have generally done quite a good job of keeping some things that used to be big problems under control. But they don't do it perfectly. And the world throws them some surprises. So, in the end, I think the point that I want to make, beyond just sort of showing off my my economics library, like, everything that I talked on there, the fact that it is in a textbook, right, means you're not at the frontier. That means that is the sort of thing that you conceivably could be assigned in a class where you are trying to get your credentials. If you want to get to the frontier, that's where you are, I guess maybe you can go a little bit further if you get sort of the handbook of, if it's econometric methods, handbook of econometrics. I actually have a handbook of art and culture because, I just roll that way. But, that would be where you're starting to get a little bit further. But really, to get to the frontier, you're basically looking at journal articles. And because of the time that it takes to publish, in some cases, you're going to the website archive. And of course, then you need to deal with the fact that these are not necessarily things that have been peer reviewed. So, that's where you get like these superconductor papers that get a lot of attention in the news. And it turns out, okay, actually, that wasn't a thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, I don't envy people that challenge, but just to what Index Gnome's talking about here, right? Like to try and simulate the economy. Like the smart way to do it, of course, is to just roll it all back and just say, yeah, we're going to do a simple model. We're going to do sort of this toy version of it, and we're going to care about, like, I think probably the things that are interesting to programmers, I imagine, are like these beautiful simulations that are so intricate. But I think Sid Meier has this very insightful question that he asks, his people when they're talking to him about this. It's like, and who's having fun? That's just it. I mean, this is the thing that's nice about hobby projects, right? Is that if it's a hobby project, of course you can go and simulate all of this. I probably imagine that a lot of the really interesting and deep simulation games have that origin in, I just want to simulate something cool. But yeah, on the other hand, like at some point there's got to be a game. And I think there's even a story of BioShock originally having all of these different factions, and the competition between the different factions and sort of this whole living ecosystem. And they eventually just threw it out because they said the player just didn't care. It wasn't relevant to their experience. Having all of that stuff sort of hard-coded in the background gave them the exact same experience. And so it was just more expedient. And I mean, nobody's saying that the quote-unquote compromised version of BioShock is bad. Most people think that those are excellent games. So, it's tough, especially too because my heart is clearly with the nerdy textbooks. Which, of course, we will get back to when I talk about managing the economy of the tiers, right? That's the game-related element, right? Nothing has ever dispelled an edict. Nothing outside of the edict's own sunset clause, as I like to think of them. I'm curious about a specific edict. Of course, ask away. Any thoughts about the Edict of Execution cast on Vendrian's Valley? It seems like the Archons were about to kill each other, and the threat of mutual destruction was all Kairos had left. I imagine fear is the only way to get someone like the Voices of Nerat to follow orders, and the Edict certainly did whip them into action. What do you know of the Edict of Stone? The Edict of Stone ravaged the realm of Azure. The upheaval of earth and rock turned the rolling plains into a craggy steppe known as the Stone Sea. Since the edict was directed at the traitorous Archon of Stone, it would seem that the upheaval of Azure was a secondary consequence, though I imagine little of what Kairos does is unintentional. I don't know if I told this before. The programmers you have did not come from a computer background at school. They're all math people. Coding is easy to teach. No, I agree. And I mean, I don't want to get too... I understand that this can be something that sets people off, and I don't want to take the maximalist version of this, but, one of the things that, at least at the level of coding I've done, one of the really valuable skills of coding is not so much understanding the operations or like the built-in functions. I mean, half the time you're using another library that maybe isn't part of the standard library anyway. But a lot of it can often be about decomposing a problem and, building a useful structure for solving it. And so, if you get to that point, it really is a point where sometimes these LLMs can be just natural language inputs to producing those sort of almost atomic units for your overall program. Now, look, let's be honest, there are better and worse ways of doing it. And very often the successful instances are cases where they're like really common, the sort of thing that maybe you would go to Stack Overflow for, and something sort of original. So actually, I guess it's almost sort of like, to a certain extent, maybe LLMs are just another version of like design patterns, maybe, just maybe more prone to error as well. But yeah, again, like there's a reason why you can't just sit down in like Gemini or Claude and say, write me a game engine. Like you're not going to get a good game engine out of it. You may get a good game engine if you understand the problem well enough that you get the LLM to give you a bunch of sort of primitives to work with, and you can understand certain trade-offs in terms of different approaches. And that, ultimately what the tool is doing here is saving you a lot of individual typing. I can sort of see that making a little bit more sense. But I mean, the thing is that at that point, you also have to have enough to know that the solution that you've got is close to what you were looking for. But yeah, I don't know. For my own part, I've always been a little surprised by the people who say that they can't code, and I always feel that's a little bit like math. Like math is not a an easy thing, right? It's a very unnatural way of thinking. It's why we have like the rules of logic. But it's also like, it's kind of like looking at a recipe book and saying I can't cook. It's like, well, you've got a set of instructions in there, and you may need to get familiar with some basics. There's certain technique, like I've seen some cookbooks that have techniques that are not really elaborated on. So I for instance, I don't know how to blanch anything, but I'm pretty sure I could look that up, and I'm pretty sure at some point I would be able to do that for myself. And again, it's sometimes it's a question in terms of how much effort you want to put into learning something, right? There are some people for which it will be more natural to think in sort of a programming sense. But yeah, I tend to agree with you that like you can probably, I think it's easier to teach someone, control flow and data types and some of these basic building blocks that they will be able to implement ideas with, than it is to teach someone to, look at a problem a particular way and sort of understand the levers that they have to solve it in an interesting or effective way. I'm actually getting this experience at work. There's someone who was sort of on a training thing, and they were, I happen to know, I got to sort of talk with them a little bit, and I happen to know that we were not their first choice, but in my opinion, they are, such a great worker because they're curious about the material. They are, they're a hard worker. Like they really just, they looked at everything they could on the subject. They wanted to learn. They had interesting ideas. And like, I'm not even going to try and suggest everything that they wrote was perfect, right? There are processes of like revision and review and things like that. But man, I can teach them the basics of like the format, and like I have stuff that I need to like get improved on and things like that. It's the aim isn't that you have someone who does stuff that can't be like that's never revised. It's just, I can trust that if I send that like I really hope that I wind up working with them again. But I would believe that if we were collaborating on something and I told them, hey, can you look into this thing for me and sort of come back with a summary of what you found? That is someone I would trust if they said there's not a whole lot that you can find on this topic, that I would only have to spend a little bit of time to verify that there's nothing on that topic. And I definitely know that there are some people that I've worked with where if I said to them, hey, could you look into this thing? And they go and they say, yeah, there's not much on there, I would actually spend almost the same amount of time confirming that for myself, just because they don't have that sort of curiosity and tendency to sort of think around certain problems. And it's whether it's a work ethic thing, whether it's a just a way of thinking about problems, that one is, in my opinion, far more valuable. I'd actually go so far as to say I do a lot of writing for the work that I do. Someone could write just a grammatical atrocity, and that has a set of really clear instructions to get better. Obviously they would be a better worker if they didn't have to have a massive revision in terms of the quality of their writing. But just getting to a point where, they're like, if they are saying some things that have genuine new insights, I will take the time to proofread that text. But if somebody writes, grammatically perfect but boring or unoriginal work, that's the shooting offense, right? Because why are we hiring someone to tell us what we already know? And so I don't know. I don't know if that's a great analogy to what you're talking about, Index, but I feel like I've had a similar experience. Yeah, you use AI a lot in your workflow, but you need to use it as a tool, not as a just. Yeah, that's actually a great way of putting it. I am surprised by the number of times that I've run into people who do not have experience in something talking about how like agentic AI does, does this thing for you. And I take a look and I'm like, this sucks. Like this is like, it's always the same response that they give, which is like, you need to verify the results. I'm like, okay, so, let's say it's a research paper. Okay, so now I'm taking this research paper and I need to check all of the citations. One, to make sure that they exist, and then second, to make sure that they say what they say. So what time have I saved, right? I was like, oh, well, you saved yourself the search for the citations. Like, but have I? Like, don't I need to, if isn't verifying the results also doing the literature search to make sure that they haven't missed certain things? And my experience with problem solving, and I think this is probably something I can say generally, is that if you're given a solution, right, or if you're married to a particular approach at the beginning, if you've been primed to think about the problem a certain way, you get sort of stuck in a mental rut. You're not going to have those sort of that lateral thinking that gets people saying, like, oh, how did you come up with that? And so if you go, as Index Gnome says here, like if you treat it like the decision maker, you are cutting yourself off from the stuff that makes you a really good worker. And yet, on the other hand, if you see it as a series of problems and these intermediate steps, and the tool will give you, a leg up on some of those intermediate steps, it can be really useful. It can be a huge time saver, which means that you have time to pursue the more interesting problems. But it's fascinating to me the number of times that I've run into people who want to turn it into a decision maker, but they only ever turn it into a decision maker on something they themselves don't do. It's maddening. I get why they do that, but it's so fascinating that like it's always people who've never done the work who think that it's a like, set it and forget it thing. Anyways. What do you know of the Edict of Fire? I know that you warned us. I'm alive today because of you. There are so many of my brothers and sisters, as are so many of my brothers and sisters, and I'm most certain you were not ordered to warn us, so all the more reason to honor your decision. Lantry bows deeply, his face blushing when he returns to standing. Given the destruction involved, a warning seemed the humane thing to do. A most noble sentiment. The edict had its intended effect. It crushed the will of the school and scattered the sages to the wind. I'm glad it brought an end to the conflict, and thanks to your warning, without further loss of life. You need to tell the LLM the facts to combine, not ask it to fill out the form with its own info. LLMs are great writers, not perfect, but the speed they can write out text is insane compared to a human. Yeah, this is one of the, it's actually interesting, because this is one area where I think we have a difference of opinion, but I also think this is one where, because it's a matter of taste and we're largely defining the specification. For my own part, I actually don't like the writing style of the LLM, and I've tried in some cases to get it to write for me, and I just really can't get on board with it. But I also know that in some cases, people really heavily rewrite a lot of stuff that I write. I have a very particular style, which is not necessary. I mean, I'm not necessarily a successful writer, right? My blogs aren't very widely read, and my my work stuff's good. I do tend to get compliments on it, but in some cases, depending on who's reading it, like they will come back with a lot of revisions, and ones that I personally don't always think are very fair, but like that's no need to litigate that on the stream. But on the other hand, right, like I also think for myself, I have sort of a certain standard, and I will say that the best I can say here is that the LLM hasn't met my own individual standard. And I'm not entirely sure that my standard can be generalized. So in this case, I also think that I'm expecting something unreasonable of it. Can you tell me about the Edict of Storms? The Edict of Storms turned the once forested lands of Stalwart into a windswept wasteland. They call it the Blade Grave now, since only the iron and bronze armaments remain. Hurricane breezes, rust winds, and relentless lightning have destroyed the housing and farmlands. Speak of something else. In this case, it's not so much the dialogue with Lantry that's taking the time as my opinions on technology. Do edicts work on the same arcane principles as spellcraft and other magic?
Edicts are the strongest manifestation of magic we know, and they seem to violate all other lesser phenomena. No dispel cantrip has ever dented or abated an edict. Even archons with powers of great durability cannot shrug off their effects. Just look at Cairn. Now, what I find curious, edicts can flex a little. Or so my studies suggest this is the case. Take the Edict of Storms. While the day it was proclaimed was the most violent, the actual radius of the storm has changed over time. But most will have none of my hypotheses on this matter.
Fine, I'll take the bait. What's your conjecture about the edicts?
So, in my studies, some edicts resolve some problem of the overlords and then vanish into history. But the edicts that linger around, almost all of them begin to widen. Their effects become more intense. Here's the intriguing part. The older the edict, and the more that's written about it, the more the reports of that edict get more dire over time.
Interesting. And edicts never seem to vanish over time?
Never. The only time history knows of edicts ending is when someone answers the commandments put forth in the original proclamation. I contend that edicts are powered by fear. Fear of Kairos helps fuel the casting, and fear of the edict feeds the magic, sustaining it, and, if enough people fear it, even growing it a bit.
This is definitely an idea I'm really interested in, and it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do this game. So there's something really interesting about the idea of, the type of magic that's specifically the edict, but in this case, it's the edict of the tyrant of the title, right, of Kairos. And it's just this fascinating idea of, the power of the tyrant, the source of the power is specifically the belief that they can get away with it, right? And I mean, you can, there's a few different lenses you can apply to that, right? Like, I think a lot of people will maybe look at something like what happened in Syria, right? Where it seems like, the Assad regime had kind of gotten out of their trouble until all of a sudden they didn't. There's this idea of this tremendous fragility. Now, that one maybe isn't such a good example because there's this sort of sustained rebellion. But there is, it is just one of these cases, right, where you have so many of these stories, both fictional and live, of it sort of requires almost this consent of the people that the regime actually be able to get away with this sort of stuff, right? And in many cases, you'll also see the toppling come as a result of essentially people sort of feeling that the edicts don't have a hold anymore. So in the case of this game, it's sort of literal magic, and yet in this case, the literal magic is fueled by the fact that the people, effectively, Kairos is able to do what they do because of the fact that people have, essentially almost feel that it's unstoppable. And of course, it's what makes the rebellion in Vendrian's Well, in one sense, at the very start, you can sort of see these as misguided rebels, right? Oh, they threw their lives away. Just to sort of as a gesture against Kairos. And yet, there is a possibility that they actually have a better understanding than you up to this point, that they do understand that Kairos' power ultimately comes through people feeling that these edicts can't be defied, and that their act of rebellion, as they say, their individual rebellion's not going to succeed, but word's going to get around, and the more people that start to disbelieve, the weaker the tyrant becomes, and then it becomes a genuine threat. This is one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting. I also will share, there's a diary entry from George Orwell. I wasn't actually specifically going to bring it up this time, but I had it in my tabs, and I think this is one. This is, I think, from 1940. It is impossible even yet to decide what to do in the case of a German conquest of England. The one thing I will not do is to clear out, at any rate not further than Ireland, supposing that to be feasible. If the fleet is intact, and it appears that the war is to be continued from America and the Dominions, then one must remain alive if possible, if necessary in the concentration camp. If the USA is going to submit to conquest as well, then there is nothing for it but to die fighting. But one must above all die fighting, and have the satisfaction of killing somebody else first. So that's Orwell facing the prospect of a German invasion of the United Kingdom. So, likewise here, right? You kind of have a similar spirit in the case of the Tears. What have others said about this theory of yours?
The other sages have had little to comment on the subject. Most found the study of Kairos to be bad luck for whatever reason. Intellectual honesty demands that I study the matter more. If I'm correct, the more people fear and obsess over an edict, the stronger it becomes. Anyway, another study for another time.
Let's speak of something else.
And I'd be happy to oblige. Ever since the fall of the Vellum Citadel, it is hard to find someone with whom I can discuss such things.
What do you know of the magic of the Archons? I've studied many of the Archons for many years. Compared to the other sages, I'm an expert on the subject, which is sad because I feel like I've still so much left to learn. How does the magic of the Archons work? The Archons all have magical powers that are intuitive. When the voices of Nerat pulls out someone's mind, or Graven Ash protects his soldiers, that magic isn't a signed spell or ritual. To them, it's closer to flexing one's hand. The Archons are the... what's the word for it? Axiom of magic? The root of magic? Spell pioneers. I'm sure this analogy is off in many ways, but I see the Archons as the mothers of original magic, and everyone else is just imitating them. While every guild or school of magic will ascribe a different name to the theory, all mages inevitably stumble upon the inescapable fact. Only the Archons can will magic into being. Everyone else can only cast magic by invoking the sigil of an Archon that has come before. None know how the Archons do their magic. It seems to be different with each Archon, but theory suggests that once an Archon starts to invoke their powers, anyone else who comes after that Archon could, with the proper knowledge, tap into that power with the proper sigil and know-how. This observed law has given rise to a common question from young students. Could one guess the sigil of an Archon not yet born, or not remembered by history, or simply unknown to the caster, and successfully cast a spell? Experienced mystics would tell you that this is impossible, for they know that it's not enough to just mimic the gestures of a sigil. One must have a willful, conscious knowledge of the Archon and the intended power being channeled. To confuse things a bit, some Archons learn to cast other spells in the same fashion as us lesser mages. If you're as important as an Archon, you learn quick that all knowledge is power. I've studied many of the Archons over many years. Compared to the other sages, I'm an expert on the subject, which is sad because I feel like I've still so much to learn. Are all Archons loyal to Kairos? Officially, yes. In actuality, no. Those with the true gift for magic always come to the attention of Kairos. Few manage to evade attention for a bit. The School of Tides was founded by one such uncontrollable, but these are history's exceptions. Occulted Jade, Archon of Tides, never bowed to Kairos, and it's said she survived the assassins sent to silence her. It makes her flight from Kairos before the war all the more troubling. We knew her as a symbol of strength, but when threatened, her weaker nature won. When we write biographies of the Archons, we often refer to them as exarchs in their formative years before stepping into their prime, but officially Kairos is supposed to grant all titles of Archon. It's quite the faux pas to self-appellate. Exactly why Jane insisted on calling herself Archon of Tides. She didn't need Kairos' approval to wear the title she deserves, and I know she loved the fact that doing so must have annoyed Kairos. I've studied many of the Archons for... Oh, sorry, we've done this before. How is an Archon born or bred? I think we all dream of one day waking up and being an Archon. Given some of the madmen and loons that we've exhibited, that have exhibited mystical greatness, it can seem unfair that the rest of us can't do it. Hello, Eldris. Folks, for those of you who do not know, Prosciutto Fist, going straight into her crone phase, is still a pretty great streamer. Has recently been doing blueprints. From judging from the quality of chat, apparently is doing it so poorly that they are compelled to backseat. Prosciutto Fist has injured her hand, something for which I should actually have a little bit more sympathy for, because she was actually quite empathetic about my being hit by a car. But we'll be returning to Lost in Random, The Eternal Die, which is actually very enjoyable. I think I like Prosciutto Fist's stream because she's got quite a wide variety of games that she plays and does them well. I definitely think she's got a wonderful camera presence. I think she has just enough sort of chaos in her to keep the streams interesting. But I will say, whether it's the history streams or, crochet or something like that, if you bother to engage with her at that level, she is very sharp, has original opinions, just someone who's just interesting to talk to across a number of dimensions. Of course, the drawback is that this is not always the level at which people will engage. There is some certain system chalk individual who comes up and will, completely ruin an otherwise enjoyable enjoy an otherwise enjoyable stream. And I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm hoping I'm not crossing a line here. I think this is anonymous enough for my chat that this will be okay. But just let me know if you want me to cut off this topic. But I've been a mod for a few streamers, right? And I definitely know that half of the broadcasters are going to have to deal with a certain type of viewer and half of them aren't, right? I am of the half that doesn't have to deal with a certain type of viewer. And one of the drawbacks here about, Pro is that, certainly, a charismatic, charming person. And I can remember seeing a certain viewer who was really going on a lot about some other broadcasters that they all liked, and they're I should say it's a meek looking they've got big glasses, friendly, look nice, and I'm like, it reminded me of that scene from Vertigo where the Jimmy Stewart's made the woman he's dating dye her hair blonde, perfectly look identical to this woman who's died, and he gives this perfectly detailed dress to somebody at the stream or in the store, and the shopkeeper just says, "Oh, the gentleman certainly knows what he wants." This is, of course, I did a terrible job of selling that line. It's a very biting line on Jimmy Stewart, because, of course, he's forcing this poor woman who's expressing preferences other than what he's saying to go onto it. But again, the drawback here, right, is that all of that is going to be ignored if the audience is just oh, it's another bespectacled milady. But yeah, anyways, for what it's worth, this is one of the reasons, for those of you that have seen my conduct in Pro's channel, you'll know I'll never admit to saying this sort of stuff inside of her chat, right? But it is actually one of the things that I've always found a bit of a shame for some of the people that I've gotten to know at length on Twitch, which is, you'll attract a certain type of viewer, and that certain type of viewer is not actually going to connect with the thing that makes you the most interesting, which is that, you can share bits of history that you've never otherwise heard, or, I actually, the biggest, I'm an easy sell on this stuff. If you happen to know something about a narrow batch of knowledge, so UBC has so many things donated by Irving K. Barber who was a forestry magnate. Forestry is an utterly fascinating topic. There are treatments of wood that make it roughly equivalent to a metal in so many cases, right? It is a topic that, you know, if you are into biology, there's a ton of interesting things. If you're into material science, there's like tons of interesting subjects. You know, there are so many subjects that can be utterly fascinating. And chances are a lot of the broadcasters that you like probably have some little area of knowledge like that if you just bother to listen to them. But yeah, so it's one of these ones where, like, I do not mean to damn with faint praise. I actually think Pro handles some of the types of viewers that she deals with very, very well. It's why I actually take the time to shout her out. I'm actually also going to feel a little bit bad for Revive Snow because I didn't spend as much time talking about Revive Snow as I do Pro, but it just happens to be that because Revive Snow and Prosciutto Fist both have rhyming names, I'll maybe give a quick shout out again. Toss them both a follow. Yeah, I guess the one real drawback with Prosciutto Fist is that she's not Canadian, whereas Revive Snow is. So if you have to pick one, I think maybe Revive Snow would be the one you have to go for. But you get what you pay for with the follow in both cases. Sorry. But no, it's a lot of fun. Both I will actually say I like both of them. I like them both for very different reasons. I've been really enjoying Revive Snow's strategy games and just chill games lately. Whereas Prosciutto Fist, I was sort of talking, her chaos is definitely not her selling point, but it's a lot of fun, and particularly for games like, this is the thing I was originally going to say before I started talking about her intellect. Yeah, and sorry, I realize I probably went to a different kind of, I went a different direction than you thought I was going to say. It mostly I just didn't want to single out individual names, but I have a feeling you have a pretty clear idea of maybe a couple names. But I don't know. I don't want to use the bully pulpit to like blast someone who I don't actually know. But yeah, in both of these cases, one of the reasons why I wanted to mention the chaos is that she did mention that she's going to be playing Lost in Random, The Eternal Die, which is very, very much like Hades. And Prosciutto Fist has a dog, or a fictional dog, named Zagreus, or Zag. So that'll kind of give you an idea in terms of how much that title might mean something. Son? Unfollowed. So I'll sometimes use my Twitch chat persona on stream. But yeah, it's I think chaos and those types of games blend. I don't show my ass on stream. Maybe I do. There's just no camera for it. Who will know? But anyways, it's I've actually rather liked watching the Blueprint stuff, but I will say, actually, sorry, I may need to take a minute for myself. I do feel bad that I'm going to be taking a break without finishing the Lantry dialogue, but I've completely undone my dressings unintentionally, and I'd kind of like to get on top of that before it becomes a problem. But anyways, two wonderful broadcasters, and I did want to specifically comment on the fact that Prosciutto Fist will be going back to Lost in Random reasonably soon, because as much as I've enjoyed Blueprints, I really do know that her heart is with Lost in Random, and it's just a type of game that, because she likes it so much, she plays it very well, and it's a bit of a treat to check out. So I'm going to try and keep this a short break, but I definitely, like, my wound's a bit of a mess right now, so I'm going to just put up a proper break. I'm going to get I'm just going to get my break done, and then, hopefully we'll have a little bit more gameplay. For those of you that have been waiting for gameplay, I do appreciate your patience on this. But, obviously when you talk about things like how the edicts work and that, I do want to try and still let this relate to the themes of the game. And if nothing else, you can just check out the clips of Revive Snow and Prosciutto Fist while we're on break. Anyways, I'll try and keep it short. I will see you all in a bit. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I don't really know too many nurses anymore, but I think the ones who I have known would actually kick my ass on principle for the job that I've done. But you know what? It'll take me through the rest of the stream, and I'm okay with that. Sorry, excuse me. I also enjoyed some sushi. So, I will share, just because the ladies are in the chat, as I can tell from the the direction it went when I left. But now that I know there's ladies in chat, plural. So the first aider, well, it wasn't actually full on first aider, but person with the first aid kit at work. He takes it's hydrogen peroxide you put on like wounds, right? So first of all, like everybody, I'm in the workplace, and I say it's like one of the reasons I'm in the workplace is like I need to like redo my bandages and stuff like that. I can't like just keep the thing that the ER put on me like for multiple days. That's gross. And probably spectacularly bad for me. So, it's like I don't want to I came with my own stuff, but it's like, could somebody who knows first aid like actually look at this thing as opposed to like me just try to use my non-dominant hand to like do something I've never needed to do to anyone, let alone myself. But it's like, it's the workplace, it's the first time people have seen me since like finding out at, the end of the workday, like just the one coworker I had on a messaging app, say it's like, look, I'm sorry to burden you with this, but could you just tell the team I've been hit by a car. I'm in the ER right now. Like I'm obviously fine enough to message you, but like, I don't think anybody knows why. Like at that point I'd been away from work for a few hours, and I don't know if anybody was like wondering where I was. So I guess it's a statement on my work ethic if they, so anyways, like that's the context. Of course they're going to be, they're going to be interested, but, I'm also removing the dressing, right? So, so I take it off, and like, so a couple of people were respectful, but I was like, is it okay if I take a look? It's not sensitive. It's like, it's very sensitive. Like I'm going to be in some pain, but like, no, if you want to take a look, like, and then like you can kind of see a couple of people in the background sort of like leaning over. It's like, no, come in if you want to see the freak show. Like it'll be your one chance, because I'm not like, I don't plan on taking this thing off pretty regularly. And I actually need to admit, I have not seen the wound that like actually needs me to like, break out the nonstick pads and the gauze and all of that stuff. I have not seen it, because it's like kind of on the bottom of my elbow. I like try and get a good view of that without using a mirror. And honestly, like, given how I reacted to some of the crazy ass bruises I had on my legs, and like, I just genuinely says like, I wish I didn't see that. Like, I don't really want to see what it looks like, right? I'll check for infection or something like that. But yeah, I learned everything I needed to know as soon as like the last layer come off, and everybody in sync like just cringed and bared their teeth, and like one person looked away, and I'm like, oh god, it's that bad. So anyway, so the reason why I say this is for the ladies. So the guy takes the hydrogen peroxide, he looks at me and says like, this is gonna hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. And I'm like, look, a little pain now, or, whatever horrors I have waiting for me if this thing gets infected. So he like, he dabs something on the cloth, or gets his gloves on and dabs the thing on the cloth. And he's like, hesitates for a minute. He's like, do you want a belt or something? I was like, he's like, just, it's like I said, it's like, appreciate, I'll let you know. So like he kind of like dabs it, and I don't really move, and then so he feels like secure enough to move on. And then he's like, It's like, are you okay? I was like, it's like, yeah, it's like, can I go a little more? It's like, you know, it's like, just do what you need to do. And he's carrying on. He's like, oh man, you're tough. I was like, so eventually, like, you know, again, he's feeling really uncertain. He's like, can I just like really go in? And I'm like, yeah, like do what you got to do, right? Like, you know, it's probably going to be worse if you just like go pussyfoot around it. So yeah, then he does one more. So I decided, just for the sake of like breaking up the monotony a little bit, to just suddenly go, ah! No, just kidding. It's fine. So it carries on. But yeah. So for better or worse, I think really just maybe, you know, I'm just accustomed to things being sore, that it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah. So, you know, manly things. There's my story for my coworkers. All right. I think we all dream one day of waking up and being an Archon. Oh, actually, the one thing, I'm sorry it came in a little bit later, but there was a really interesting idea behind the magic in this game, which for some reason I think you may find interesting. So Lantry has a theory about the Overlord Kairos's edicts, the most powerful type of magic in this game's world, that the instances of the magic that have grown because sort of the legend of the edict is sort of being retold and getting bigger. And so his theory essentially is that the edicts are driven by fear. And to me, I just thought it was such an interesting idea that, you know, it's this idea of the tyrant's power coming from almost this implicit consent of the subjects, right? The fact that they think the edicts can work is what gives the edicts the power. And of course, that is the key to breaking it. And I just think there's some kind of interesting implications in terms of the nature of the rebellion that you're dealing with, that they're not just these sort of noble sacrifices on principle, but rather that it's actually a specific mechanism designed to weaken the tyrant's power. And I don't know, it's definitely not an idea you see explored in games a lot, which I like. I think that's a worthwhile one. There's an episode of Supernatural when they can't destroy a guy's ghost with just his bones because he got dragged behind a car and there were too many pieces of him and his soul essence on the road. That's a fun idea. All right, I think we all dream one day of waking up and being an Archon. Given that some madmen and loons that have exhibited magical greatness, it can seem unfair to the rest of us that can't do it. I can say with confidence, Archons aren't born, they become. Graven Ash is a good study of this. Before he was Archon of War, he was a successful commander, each victory more daring and glorious than the next. Somewhere along the way, his leadership took on mystical qualities. The Graven Ash we know today can reach out and protect his soldiers from harm, but maybe at first he could just protect those near him. I wouldn't know for certain, but all will attest that he didn't have this power his whole life. Let's speak of something else.
And I'd be happy to oblige. Ever since the fall of the Vellum Citadel, it is hard to find someone with whom I can discuss such things.
What do you know of spellcraft?
I've forgotten more than most blood chanters have ever learned. What do you want to know?
Can you teach me anything?
Most certainly. I probably should have shown you how to mend wounds sooner. If you have a moment, I can show you the healing sigil I was trained to use.
No time like the present. Rummaging through his satchels, the sage produces a long quill and a crumpled piece of parchment. With 7 quick strokes of the quill, he inks a pattern on the page. We'll start with first principles. When mending wounds and easing pain, we invoke the magic of the Orphan Midwife, Archon of Rebirth. By invoking her sigil, we channel her mastery, however briefly, through our hands. Now, trace the sigil, following the lines in the order I sketched them. What can you tell me about this Archon of Rebirth? Didn't realize you care about your history. Well, the Orphan Midwife was born in 160, bowed to Kairos in 201. They say where she walked, plants would sprout, and the sick would grow vigorous. She'd also send most folks into fits of rage and animals into heat. Sounds like quite the riot. We know her magic by way of one of her first disciples, who migrated to the Tiers in 222 to spread her wisdom, an act that happened to be illegal under Kairos' law. For that and a host of other transgressions, the Orphan Midwife has been imprisoned for over a century. or so the story goes. Follow his instructions. Since this isn't your first cantrip, I'll move a little quickly, but I think you can keep up. Lantry walks you through countless repetitions of the signing mystic sigil. For hours, you wave your hand in the air to no effect, until at last you sign the pattern in the air and feel a rush of power through your veins. And so, if you need to heal pain as opposed to purge an infection, you'll move your hand like so. But, that's enough for now, and I think the rest you can figure out on your own. What sort of magic did the sages teach you? Sage Sindon tutored me in the traditional sigils. Those are preservation, concealment, and healing, as derived from the bygone archons of Thavarus, Fading Wrath, and the Orphan Midwife. The preservation magic is largely functional, sealing parchment, binding books, that sort of thing. All us chroniclers learn the concealment magic, as our ideal method would be to study events without contaminating the decisions being made. As for the healing magic, many of us modern sages study this a great deal. The school has a shoddy reputation among the common folk. I figure that if they knew us as healers and caregivers, maybe we'd start to change opinions. So you study magic to spy on people. You call it spying, I call it studying a subject without inducing causative elements. But I suppose, yes, my magic is useful for doing the stealthy sorts of things one expects a spy to do. Way to make me sound so tawdry. Well, you can tell me about signing magic. Scholars don't have a good word for what archons do when they cast magic. I couldn't tell you how Graven Ash casts his protection over his soldiers, nor would I know how Blood and Mark consciously decides to move through a shadow. But when us mere mages want to cast a spell, we do so by signing the sigil of an archon that previously discovered the magical phenomenon in question. It's debated whether archons create new magic or just discover magic that was waiting for us, but such questions seem impossible to answer while sober. That's all for now. Lantry loyalty ability, Wheel of Ages. And we learn the Sigil of Life. Alright, so on Lantry, 1 per rest. For using your Paradox account, you've received the Dire Remedy. Affects allied target, emitting foe for AoE versus will, minus dodge, minus parry, minus action speed, minus move speed, emitting friendly, hostile effects suspended for 3 seconds. Okay, cool. So restoring touch or healing wisps. I'm not going to mess with this, but... Okay, I know we've been doing a lot of dialogue, but I want to get through verse. I want to see if we can talk with Ebb, and then Barrick was going to be the thing that was the next mission for us. So if it'll take a long time, I don't have a lot of options here because Ebb, unless we take her with us, this is kind of my last chance to talk with her, but Barrick will definitely be the last one.
So, the Scarlet Chorus and Disfavored are at each other's throats. Can't say I didn't see that coming, but the Archons might have waited until one war was over before they started another.
Do you think I made the right decision?
Fighting with the Disfavored. Well, not the call I would have made, but I'm sure you have your reasons. If you like iron weapons or something about that purple uniform excites you, then be my guest. Who can say? War is all about compromising your morals, deciding who lives and dies. What seems like a mistake turns into your greatest call down the road. Let me make one thing clear, just so that there aren't any misunderstandings. You support Graven Ash, and I couldn't care less. I'm here because you've done what none of the Archons could. Not even the voices of Nerat would fault me that. He's also a complete bastard, and I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to stab him in the gut and take control of his army. So, there's that. I'll say this much. Our time together is anything but dull. My blades are yours for as long as you'll have me.
Noted. I have questions for you.
What do you need?
Alright, I'm gonna just take a
If
quick
you
look.
insist. I'm a Scarlet Fury. That should raise some flags for you. It means that I'm good at killing, and more importantly, that I enjoy it. What I won't enjoy are the pleasures of funerary rites packed with weeping mourners. Someday I'll fall in battle, and then they'll roll me into a mass grave or heap me atop a shit-stained wagon. One more anonymous, knife-riddled piece of meat. Until then, I plan to take whatever I can from life and have a little fun along the way.
I'm not going to do either of these. Oops.
At your service, Fatebinder.
Verse bows with an added flourish.
What do you need? The
Time
Scarlet
goes.
Chorus is most... What do you need to know?
This might get me some fear, but how is it that you picked up your fallen sister's weapon skills? That's been on my mind for some time, and I still don't have an explanation that fits. I have a few ideas, but Verse frowns in deep thought. Scarlet Furies share a sort of link. It's how we coordinate our dance in the heat of battle. We don't pass messages or anything, but our emotions and our intentions sync up without words. She starts worrying one of her knives, and after a moment she sighs and slaps the blade back into its sheath. Go on. The one thing I always knew was that I felt this connection more keenly than my sisters did. I could pick up nuances that they had missed, and I could feel them from further away. When my sisters died, I felt each one of them getting yanked out of my brain like someone pulling snails from a garden, but some of their slime residue was still there. Does that make any sense? You should exploit the skill to its fullest potential. Skill? I'm not sure I'd call it that. There's something parasitic about it, but I take your point. If there's an advantage to this thing I'm experiencing, I'm not above using it against our foes. No matter how you paint it, some part of my sisters broke off in me when they died. Now I'm left to deal with it. Just another day in the tears, right? All right, want to ask about our travels.
What did you have in mind?
What do you think about our present circumstances? I didn't know in what brain-addled state you thought the disfavored were the army to support, but I see you're committed to it. Of course, you're free to do as you like. Zigzagging around the tiers, pissing off authorities as we go? I suppose there are worse ways to occupy one's time. Any particular reason you've chosen to travel with me?
Well, if you're baiting me for a compliment, you're talking to the wrong girl. I don't have a gang anymore, and I wouldn't throw in my lot with any of the killers floating around the Scarlet Chorus ranks. The fact of the matter is you're doing important work, even if you stumble and flail along the way. If that puts me at odds with my Scarlet Chorus ties, so be it. I'm not such a camp follower that I don't look after my interests first. And I find you interesting.
Milady?
You've satisfied your curiosity, so let me satisfy mine. Why are you keeping a little scrap of a thing like me around?
Option 3, right? No. You're a hardened killer, that's reason enough.
I wonder what makes you so sure I won't cut your throat some evening just to hear you gurgle. It's taking a risk when you travel with someone like me. I suppose time will tell.
She flashes you a pleasant smile. What do you think of our travel companions? Anyone in particular? What do you think of Lantry? I've been meaning to ask you about him. Lantry is talkative, reads when he isn't writing, and brings about as much to the battlefield as a sick bird. The warriors at your side shouldn't suffer from an elder's ache in their sword arm. You would be better served by putting him out of his misery. We need him, and that's all you need to know. Understood. You've got something in mind you're using him to accomplish? Then by all means, let him tag along. But don't expect me to keep him alive. If he's pulling his weight somehow, feel free to clue me in, because I'm not seeing it. What do you think of Barrick? You mean that's my stinking brother in the Iron Stute? Her nose wrinkles with disgust. Well, I'll give him some due credit. He's more complicated than he looks. He's still an intolerant and unapologetic bastard, but that's more his business than mine. What do you think of Ebb? It's easy to respect someone who brings that much passion to battle. Even so, when she gets to talking about pushing Kairos out of the tiers, she makes me want to carve my opinions on the matter across her back. Back to my previous questions.
Go ahead, Fatebinder.
Now, we've did this with Barrick before, but have either of you noticed that you fight particularly well together?
The thought has crossed my mind from time to time. During the many battles of the Conquest, we found ourselves standing back to back with enemies on all sides on more than one occasion.
The big guy here is as useless as an empty scabbard without his phalanx to keep him alive, but I move fast enough to compensate for it. And it's nice having a living wall of rusted iron I can use for cover.
Do you think this is because of your shared heritage?
If you want to attach some arcane meaning to the whole thing, be my guest. I couldn't tell you for sure. I doubt that a capable tactician could explain why certain soldiers learn to rely on each other.
In the disfavored ranks, the Oathbound seem to know more about synchronizing their efforts, and the same could be argued for the Scarlet Furies. I don't know how they pair up their units, but it isn't by virtue of blood.
I want you two to train together.
Absolutely not. Our fighting styles are incompatible, and any disfavored lieutenant will tell you not to join at the hip soldiers who can't stomach each other.
I'm inclined to agree. If you want to pair up fighters, there has to be some great passion or magnetism between them. We don't have it.
If neither of you's up to the challenge, then I won't force the matter.
A valiant attempt, but I'm not as easily swayed by your courtly tongue.
Neither am I. At least, not in this context.
We can discuss this again later. All right. So Barrick, again, was going to be the last one, but I want to see what I can say to Ebb.
Salutations, Fatebinder. Or should I now call you Lord of Vendrian's Well? The Spire King? Prince of the suggestive vertical slab.
I did not hear that last one before. I do like the fact that you always have the option to glare silently in this group. So, Fatebinder is fine, no need for other titles, or Solon will suffice. Yeah, Solon will suffice.
So if I might ask, what is your plan now? The edict no longer looms overhead, and Kairos' conquest of the Tiers seems to be slipping. What with the armies in civil war.
First order of business, I should speak with Tunon.
I would counsel you to do just that. I'm sure the events of Vendrian's Well are best explained from your mouth to Tunon's ears. Furthermore, I'd guess the Archon of Justice would want to know your take on the Archons and their divide.
I'm improvising. Any suggestions?
My first suggestion would be to build a boat. Something durable, and take our chances on the high seas far from Kairos. I have a second and more practical suggestion. Look to the horizon and slightly up. By that I mean the other spires. We should see what's atop the others. Otherwise someone else might look first.
What do you know about the spires?
Not nearly enough, apparently. To me, they've always been axioms of navigation. You can triangulate a lot of things with the sextant and a clear view to a spire or two. We've long known the spires radiate strong magical fields, and all save the mountain spire connect to the old walls. So it's the sort of thing common folk know from afar, but avoid day to day.
That's all I have for now.
Well, short of Tunon giving you orders on pain of death, you have the luxury of acting on your own volition. Though the Scarlet Chorus are likely to come for you. Whatever you decide, I'm at your disposal.
Your assistance will be most helpful. Thanks.
And I am thankful to not be a bloody pile of offal in Vendrian's Well. Life under your banner will, I'm sure, prove most interesting.
Have a moment? Let's speak further.
What is it you need?
We should discuss matters at hand.
Now we're working with the disfavored. You want my advice? My advice would be to get close to Graven Ash and plunge a poisoned shiv in his ear.
And how exactly do you think one goes about doing this?
Well, if you're working with Graven Ash, give it your all. Offer to help the Archon of War with whatever he needs. The stronger the Legion, the weaker the Chorus. And if you get close enough to him, well, with enough trust, you could get very close to the Archon of War. I'm not saying it's a quick plan, but I think if you stay close in his confidence, the moment to strike will reveal itself in time. Now we're working with the disfavored. You want my advice? My advice would be to get close to Graven Ash and plunge a poisoned shiv in his ear.
Say, Graven Ash is my ally. I won't entertain such treachery.
I will never understand why deceit is the first instinct of all Tiersmen. You are right to take offense.
Yeah, right. I'm speaking out of line. But I don't really know what to say here. I hate the disfavored, but I'm sworn to your cause, so my honest opinion won't do anyone any good.
I have some questions for you.
Ask away.
Let's speak of magic.
You know, I normally charge for this, but for you...
Ebb smiles, awaiting your query. Can you tell me about your magical tradition?
Now, you know that's a very personal question. The knowledge I have is a centuries-old gift from the Archon of Tides. I would sooner discard my life than the sanctity of that gift. I will speak in generalities only.
Ask. Worst I can do is not tell you. Tell me how you influence Terratus Grave. Trade secret, not one I'm going to talk about. The School of Tides dies with me, and so too will this. Don't bother trying to change my mind on this matter. It'll get ugly quick. Tell me how you influence ice, mist, and other forms of water. With years of training... Now look, most of those secrets have already been stolen ages ago by the sages. Doesn't mean I'm going to tell you just because the secret's already out, but it means you can go ask someone else if you really feel entitled to know. And before you ask, I've learned plenty from knowledge stolen by the sages, but no, I don't know how to do what Ebb does, magically or otherwise. Can you teach me what you know? I suppose I'm capable of it, but no, the secrets of the Archon of Tides dies with me. Occulta Jade, Archon of Tides, is the founder of the School of Tides as well as its only ruler. Though she wore the title Archon, Occulta Jade never bowed to Kairos, though many have tried to compel her to do so. Having arrived with settlers that made landfall at 5 Wives, she is perhaps the oldest known living Tearsman, capable of manipulating the oceans, the moons, and all the transitory forms of water. Occulta Jade used her magic to form a cabal of seafaring traders, musicians, and academicians, and it was the dedication to the arts that helped the school endure. For by teaching these trades to the children of noble families, the school remained in the good graces of the realms. Being able to control most anything cyclical and fluid, Occulta Jade has lived for centuries and could still be alive today, but none know with certainty. In the years before the conquest, the School of Tides discovered the Overlord's plan to invade. Despite all assumptions that the Tier's resident Archon would defend her school and home, to the surprise of everyone, the Archon vanished across the seas, taking nearly the entire School of Tides with her into exile across uncharted waters. What are the philosophical teachings of your magic? There's a question I can answer. It would surprise you little to learn that we see all things, people, war, seasons, to be cyclical, waxing and waning through their various forms like the tides and the light of Terratus Grave. Terratus the planet has 2 satellites visible by the naked eye, the tide-locked Terratus Grave and the rapidly orbiting Interloper. Scholars have long studied the effects of these 2 moons on the ocean currents, and a great deal of folklore concerns the origins of the moons. A common belief in Kairos Empire is that Terratus Grave will finally set on the horizon when Kairos' rule ends, whereas those on the tiers insist that the moons are older than the old walls and will outlive even Kairos. The mind is limited. We're born and spend our lives dodging death. We expect all stories to have a beginning and an end. We can assume all things start and stop, just like us. In truth, all things are cycles, some by a matter of minutes, others by matters of years or lifetimes. In the School of Tides, we appreciate patterns of all sorts. Most are called to the depths, others find their interests skybound. Many still find the tides of human emotion and political fortunes far more intriguing than inanimate tides found in the orbits and oceans. From what Archon do the Tidecaster draw upon their magic? The first Tidecasters were given the gift of magic by our school's founder, Occulta Jade, Archon of Tides. Though she was not of Kairos' ilk, she was as powerful as any Archon, and from her name and legacy, we can mimic the moon's pull on the seas and change the currents. So I'm pretty sure we just read both of these. And it's from her that we have the spells to turn the moon's pleasant hues into a baleful ray of searing grave light. In all these years, I have not grown tired of the thrill of power. It's a rush of carnal humors every time. Gravelight is the magical term for the light of the moon, Terratus Grave, specifically when harnessed and manipulated for nefarious purposes. While the moon's rays are normally incapable of causing so much as a mild sunburn, the Tidecasters have long studied magic that can concentrate these rays into bolts and beams of searing doom. The Tidecasters have spent centuries trying to mimic and control the moon's tidal pull on the oceans, and will often mention that diverting moonlight is the easy stuff compared to pulling and pushing the tides, but modern times have forced the School of Tides to concentrate on the more martial applications of this magic. So this, I guess, would be one answer for what I do with Lantry. I could replace Lantry with Ebb, and then Ebb would basically... So I'd have sort of 3 melee characters, and then Ebb would not be healing people, but would be eliminating the enemies faster, and so we wouldn't necessarily need the healing. I'm guessing you can tell me more than I ever wanted to know about the moons. You'd be right. My magic is generally associated with the moon Terratus Grave, but you have to know where the interloper is in the sky when mucking about with mystic forces. Do you control water, or do you mimic the tidal effects the moons have on water? Both, actually. I'm amused you're keen on the difference. Our spells of ice and mist affect water directly, but are of limited volume. Displacing your own body weight in water is no mean feat. But if I were to move an ocean current, I'd drive myself nuts moving water in front of a boat a little at a time. That's where I'd use a cantrip to simulate a tidal pull. Terratus Grave is the big one, right? Tell me about it. Terratus Grave is fixed in the sky, always overhead day and night. It was first named by folks living far to the east. They'd look to the west and see the moon like a permanent hill on the horizon, a grave where the sun dies each evening. That's how the older folks saw it. If you live in the western part of the world, Terratus Grave is overhead all the time. This means that day and night it's reflecting the sun's rays, and if you know what you're doing, it doesn't just reflect, it magnifies. Interloper's the one that moves in the sky, if I remember the lessons correctly. Exactly. Interloper orbits Terratus at a steady clip, and its orbit sometimes crosses in front of Terratus Grave, leading to mystical calamity if you don't know what you're doing. Let's talk about something else. Have you heard anything from the Tidecasters that left before the war? No, and I don't like entertaining hope. Those cowards are all gone. If they didn't die at the sea, they're dead to me. I reserve the right to be pleasantly surprised if they come back, eager to fight the good fight, but I'm not holding my breath. All the brave Tidecasters died, present company accepted. We could talk about other arcane matters.
You know, I normally charge for this, but for you...
Do you know anything about the magic of the Archons? Enough to know I'm out of my element. That is to say, I've studied the many Archons a great deal, and I have a great number of hypotheses and conjectures, but, well, I'm no expert yet. And like most who have invoked the Archons of times past to work magic, I do wonder what difference of birth or experience gives one the magical potential to be an Archon. Most of my studies have been into the question of origins of form. It's known we can emulate the magic of Archons that came before us, but is it possible to tap into the magic of Archons yet to be? So far, the answer seems to be no. She looks to the ground with a rumpled smirk. Know anything about the old walls and spires? Not enough. Never enough. Ebb smiles, twirling her staff in her hands. As a child, I was terrified of the old walls. I think it's true of most folk. Now I can art Gravelight with a wriggle of my fingers. Well, I think I think when I'm a shriveled old hag, dying in the old walls would be a great way to go. What can you tell me of the Bane? What I know is largely taken from Master Cambriel's work and some near-fatal experience venturing close to the old walls. As best I understand it, the Banes are a bit of magical will that have an extended life of their own. I'm of the belief that they nest or reproduce in the old walls, the only place you regularly find them. Our magic attracts the Bane. That much I know to be true firsthand. Again, this is personal theory, and I'm guessing they eat or drink magic, so our spells are invitations to dine. Let's change the subject.
Ask away.
Tell me about yourself. What would you like to know? Tell me about your name. Well, I was born Hazen Lavinia, but for the most of my life, and I suppose for all the days after, I'm known and will be known as Ebb. Tidecaster Ebb for those trying to be obsequious. I've also probably used a bunch of aliases that are going to haunt me at some point. Hazen, didn't realize you were nobility. I know, I dress myself and cook my own food, so misleading. Mother was a magistrate of Ardent, father was admiralty. It's mostly meaningless, though. Our lands are now the overlords. How'd you get your nickname? It's one of those not especially funny jokes that stuck long past its season. I wrote the word Ebb incorrectly on a written examination. Master Fulvax started calling me Ebb from then on. He claimed it fit me, and it was a cynical. Said I was a cynical little shit that always sees the ebb, never the flow. Let's change the subject. I do like the facepalm posture. Did you always want to be a tidecaster? So when I was a little girl, what I really wanted to be was a marine, the burly bitch at the prow of the trireme, first to crack some skulls when the ships rammed. You know, an honest living. Fortunately, the school sought me out before I got myself killed at sea. The School of Tides was looking for new blood, and my father was an admiral of Haven, so the school wanted me for the political connections. I got to spend my first couple of years proving I actually belonged with the Tidecasters. That was fun. What did you do in the years before the war? My husband was born in Apex and left his prosperous lands to be with me. So when the nest was empty, it seemed right we leave my homeland and see his side of the tears. We had a year and a bit to ourselves before the war upturned things. We saw all of Apex. I took him along my old sailing routes around Five Wives and Sunder. Those were good times. Then came the war, and I learned I would be one of the last Tearsmen to live free of Kairos. Ever since then, I think Oathbreaker has technically been my chosen profession. Tell me about your family. Trying to salt old wounds? They're all gone, but if you really care to know, I had a husband, 3 kids, siblings I didn't hate. Every family has its troubles. I was lucky that awkward and stilted dinner banter was the worst of it. Tell me about your husband. Pollux Aldanos and I were married in 410. Aldanos was a falxman of the Vendrian Guard back before they were starving partisans, but I saw him more as a carpenter. Woodworking was just a hobby of his, but my fondest memories are of him trying to shape something, and me making stupid jokes about the firmness of his materials. What became of him? He perished at the gates of judgment. I saw him die. I do not wish to discuss it just now. Just know I've made peace with it, and I'm glad that I was with him on the field of battle when his time came. I miss him, but it might have been for the best. Though he was only a few years older than me, my studies left me always a bit younger than him. The difference grew with time. Aldanos was slowing down and half figured the gates of judgment would be his last battle. If anything, he got exactly the death he wanted, so in that sense, I'm very happy for him. Tell me about your children. There were the twins, Drevnor and Lorma, then my youngest son, Akmus. Aldanos wanted more, but I was nearing the end of my trials at the School of Tides, and dueling with lethal magics is a terrible idea when with child. Drevnor and Lorma followed my husband's trade and took to the falx. Akamus liked the harp more than people. Can't blame him one bit. I made sure my children could read, and I'm damn proud of the fact. Probably the only thing I did right. What of the twins? They died at the gates of judgment. Or at least Drevnor died, run through by a disfavored spear. Lorma was at the battle, but I don't know what became of her. My fear has been that she was recruited by the Scarlet Chorus. Perhaps she has a new name, if she's still alive. What became of your youngest? Without Drevnor and Lorma, Akamus, well, he took his own life in 430. Ebb shrugs, her eyes glancing away. I should have put him on a trireme and shoved him out onto the high seas. He did not ask for birth, nor did I prepare him for the bitterness that life would offer. Very sorry for your loss. Spare me the sorrow. We've all lost family to Kairos. I just lost 2 in battle. Even then, I'm hardly unique. What about the rest of your family? My family's Haven folk through and through. My mother prided herself on being descended from Hazen Rabin, one of the founding magistrates of the city of Ardent. She looks to the side, mouth twisting in thought. Sad thing is, they died during the conquest, but that's not how I lost contact. I lost contact because magic and travel became my life. I had plenty of time to get to know them as an adult, but I simply missed it. But that one's my fault. Can't rightly blame Kairos for everything. Not so sure I believe any of this. You don't seem all that troubled.
Well, I'm an accomplished liar, but I've no need to spin a tale about any of this. My husband, most of my kids, my parents. Kairos' thugs took them all. If I don't seem broken up, it's because I'm not. I don't feel such things anymore.
You sign your magic with a great deal of anger.
I like to think of it more as well-refined rage. But amusing you noticed it all the same. Hate is akin to an acid, a poison of the heart that consumes most from within. And like any fluid, if you know how to hold it, you can apply it.
I think you should just smile more.
It's a trick of the trade, I suppose. One's surges and dry spells of emotion are no different than the rhythms of the waves. There's a shared logic to taming both. Sadness, mania, rage. I suppose I have these things, but they're just humors in the blood to be pushed, needed, and restrained as the situation demands.
You gotta play to the audience, right? Let's change the subject. How did you fall in with the Vendrian Guard? What does it matter now that they're gone? They seemed the last hope for the Tears, and a ninny-shitting fuck of a chance is still more than no chance at all. Let's change the subject.
Ask away.
I have questions about the people of the Tears.
We all know how to swim, and we all know how to fight. Most Northmen are lucky to make half that boast. What would you like to know?
I'm curious about the people of the Tears. I think you'll find each of us thinks themselves a child of Haven, as in my case, or a child of Azure, child of Apex, or what have you. But I suppose we Tearsmen have our shared customs. The most treasured of those customs used to be pride in being free of Kairos' rule. Did you have any particular questions? When were the Tears settled? Human settlers arrived over 400 years ago, displaced from a war between what are now Kairos' realms of Treven and the Fertile Sands. A flotilla of barely seaworthy rigs headed west across the high seas. Tearsmen will sometimes speak of the Five Wives. We use it to refer both to the first 5 settlements where the colonists made landfall, as well as to the 5 matriarchs that went on to form the ruling dynasties of the Tears. Of course, I'm leaving out the matter of the builders of the old walls. Who knows when they lived here and why they're gone? Those old walls didn't just fall out of the sky. Why don't men own land or women ships? For centuries, it has been our way that the men own the ships, but that the women own the harbors. Our customs don't truly prevent ownership, they limit inheritance. Lands pass to daughters, and then sisters, then mothers and aunts. Ships pass to sons, then brothers, then fathers and uncles. It seems strange to outsiders, but it makes sense to me. Men are blessed with wanderlust, women with a sense of the permanent. Likewise, the captain of a ship can't pause or carry a child, and the men grow restless if left in place. In truth, the custom varies from place to place, and you'll find men with enough wealth own land, and women with enough sway own ships. As is often the case, the nobles pick and choose their traditions. Why didn't the younger realms stand united against Kairos? Are you trying to rub it in? Yes, the younger realms were defeated one at a time by the invaders. Maybe if I was the queen of the Tears, that wouldn't have happened. Well then, what would have Queen Ebb done? I would have taken the threat seriously the moment troops were stopped marching to the gates of judgment. Am I the only person whose mother mentioned that Kairos was a real threat? Opportunity. That's what killed us. Haven wanted to watch the bastard tier fall first. Apex was hoping Haven would fall. Azure wanted Stalwart to be attacked first. Every realm of the tiers had some interest in watching their neighbors fall first, so we all held back our support until a year or two so into the war. Too fucking late by then, squabbling idiots. Tearsmen live with greater numbers of beastmen. What's that like? The beastmen of the Tears are hardier and smarter than their kin elsewhere, and fortunately we have lived together in relative harmony for some time. Make no mistake, life is difficult for most beastmen in the Tears, but compared to, say, how they're treated in the Northern Empire, I would like to think we Tearsmen are a bit more modern and forward-thinking, even if just a bit. But I suppose I also take an overly optimistic view of our beastly cousins. I find their clumsy honesty endearing, and while no human will say nice things about my cooking, no beastman has ever said anything mean about my worst dishes. Let's change the subject. She nods, silently awaiting your follow-up. What of the major resistors to Kairos' rule?
Aside from the ones you slew? Well, the Vendrian Guard were the most staunch opponents of Kairos. With their passing, the Overlord's rule is absolute. Well, aside from the local Archons being in a state of civil war. Was there a particular group you wish to discuss?
Tell me about the Unbroken.
The Unbroken is the name of the military of the now fallen realm of Stalwart. every citizen of Stalwart was trained to fight, and all were expected to answer the rallying cry of the regents, the ruling small council of the realm.
The Unbroken Legion was the proud and accomplished army of the realm of Stalwart. Citing their victories as evidence of their skill, they prided themselves on never facing defeat while fighting on home soil. After the Edict of Storms tore apart Stalwart and twisted it into the Blade Grave, barely a 20th of the Unbroken's former strength survived to continue the war against Kairos' forces.
A decade ago, Stalwart was the ass end of jokes Tearsmen would tell each other. The people of Stalwart are obnoxiously proud of a long history of being invaded but never losing. The disfavored put an end to their vaunted record of victory. The Unbroken still persist, albeit marginally so. The disfavored withdrew after the Edict of Storms began shredding the landscape. Their holdfast of Sentinel Stand Keep was never taken, and the citizen army, though scattered, could still be rallied.
Tell me about the Stone Stalker tribe.
Kairos' war was disastrous to the human realm of Azure, but a stroke of good luck for the numerous beastmen that toiled in Azure's endless wheat fields. With the Masters all dead, the serfs have been set free. The Stonestalkers are a tribe born from these newly freed beasts. I imagine they would never bow to Kairos or the Archons. Too many generations have been enslaved. I'd wager anything they'll die before they ever bow.
Stonestalkers, the largest spanning beast tribe in the entirety of the tiers, the Stonestalkers of Azure nearly tripled in population during the period of domestication and forced labor in service to the farmers and ranchers of the realm. However, like all beasts, the Stonestalkers were born wild and yearned to range free, unfettered by humans within their own homeland. In ancient times, the tribe was known as the Meadowkins, but they were denied a name during their centuries of enslavement. In the turmoil created by Kairos' invasion of the Tiers and the conquest of Azure, the beasts rebelled and won their freedom. Drawn to the enigmatic presence of Cairn, Archon of Stone, the beasts took on the name Stonestalker as their own. After Cairn's defeat when Kairos proclaimed the Edict of Stone on Azure, creating the Stone Sea, the Stonestalkers retreated into the wilds. The humans, who have since encroached on their territory, have been slaughtered.
Beastmen understand strength and leadership, but it's always in the concrete sense. I can't pretend to know how they think, but I could never imagine them accepting an absent Prima. A distant ruler they can't see or smell seems a bit too abstract.
Prima, the leader of a beast tribe, a supremacy almost always held by a female. This rank is won and defended through vicious bloodshed and fights for dominance rather than birthright. Many alphas exist within a single tribe, but only one can rise above the other as Prima. Tell me about the Bronze Brotherhood.
The Bronze Brotherhood is one of the most feared and famous of the Free City mercenary companies. They serve the highest bidder, and during the war, that was Kairos.
The Bronze Brotherhood is a mercenary company from the Free Cities dotting the Tier's southern coast. Many of these mercenary companies were employed by Kairos' agents and slaughtered during the war. The Bronze Brotherhood survived thanks to the relatively safe posting at Lethian's Crossing, where the Voices of Nerat hired the company to help protect the town's forge operation. Among the most trained and dedicated warriors of the Tiers, the Bronze Brotherhood have a reputation for ruthlessness and tenacity. Aggression and decisive thinking are so highly prized by the Brotherhood that the violent, enigmatic Scourge is the group's mascot, a creature of most decent folk consider the stuff of nightmares. The term brother is used for mercenaries of both genders, as the company's title harkens back to the archaic notion of living as men. In Tier's custom, this amounts to releasing all claims to lands, to better assure an employer that the Brotherhood won't covet the realms they're paid to protect.
Most of the Brotherhood perished in the war, but a handful. The crew hired to work at Lethian's Crossing. They got to babysit the Forge-bound and survived the last few years with minor losses. The band is too small to be a serious threat to the disfavored or the chorus, but they are Scourge-worshipping berserks that will adopt any enemy for the right price. Maybe even Kairos.
Are there other remnants of the younger realms that could still rise against Kairos?
Several sages came to our aid during the Second Battle of Vendrian's Well. I at first thought they meant to kill me, but instead they put their lives on the line for us. They spoke of others in their guild braving the Edict of Fire to salvage lore from the burning library. Though I may find them untrustworthy, it must be said that the sages have a certain fearlessness toward the Overlord. Perhaps that could be kindled further. Historically speaking, an alliance with the School of Ink and Quill is just asking to have your efforts stolen and your goals undermined. Mark my words, some things never change.
Think of the sages as a resource. In that sense, we're fools not to use them.
Well, perhaps we can shove them in front of the enemy. And the ones that volunteered at Vendrian's Well weren't all bad.
Let's change the subject. What can you tell me about the different nations of the Tiers? Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the younger realms, the Bastard Tier and the Free Cities, in about that order of prominence. We all trace our roots back to the Five Wives, though sometimes a bit of ancestral shoreline seems all we have in common. Tell me about the younger realms. Haven, Azure, Apex, and Stalwart have been the four major forces of the Tiers for the last 4 centuries. A few other dynasties have tried their hand, but eventually were defeated or absorbed into the 4 we know today. Not sure where the term younger came into fashion, but there's always been a term of humble contrast. Just look at the old walls. Someone was here before us and built them. Don't know really anything about them, but it stands to reason that there used to be an older realms that did all the construction. Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the younger realms, the Bastard Tier and the Free Cities, and about that order of prominence, we all trace a route back to 5 Wives. Okay. Tell me about the Bastard Tier. It's the northernmost of the Tiers, and the choke point to the Northern Empire. It's been a hub of trade for centuries, and a long line of merchant families and private armies have kept the realm largely lawless. Though many used to joke about the Bastard City being sacked by rabid dogs, Tunon's capture of the city was a terrible blow to the morale of the Tiersmen. We knew that that day Kairos was more than just a fun story to scare your kids. What can you tell me about the Free Cities? There's little free about the Free Cities, save for their independence from the younger realms. They are not physically adjacent, but rather politically allied by their shared hatred of the other realms. Most all of the Free Cities were defeated with little effort by Kairos' forces. Way I heard it, Nerat just had to have agents hire up their mercenaries in order for them to simply be elsewhere when the armies of the Overlord arrived. Let's change the subject.
Ask away.
What can you tell me of the Archons in the Tiers?
Not entirely sure. Which is to say, there was a time I studied my enemy in great detail, but I've recently come to learn that much of my information was little more than lies and misdirection.
What of the voices of Nerat? The Archon of Secrets lives up to his name. If he weren't so loathsome as a beast, I'd half admire his mastery of the magical arts. They say he knows all the sigils lost to history, but I've also heard it is said that stolen knowledge is why he speaks in his different voices. But in truth, I'm learning most of what I know is just lies and misdirection, though I'd guess he'd be a poor Archon of Secrets if I had my facts straight. What do you know of Graven Ash? Before the conquest, I assumed Graven Ash a harmless old man, an Archon in name only past his prime. I could not have been more wrong. Many have underestimated the great general by his age. Few of them have made the mistake twice. Ash is a remarkable general. He's led his tiny band of disfavored on a nearly unstoppable rampage of the Tiers, and he does not seem to win his wars with obvious displays of mystic powers, but with old-fashioned leadership and good soldiers. A year or so back, under a blue flag talk with a commander, I was told the Archon knows the name of every soldier under his command, living and dead. The way the disfavored speak of Ash, you'd think he'd raised each of them from the cradle. Know anything of Cairn? Enough. She inhales sharply, folding her arms with a scowl. There's clearly a story here. I'd like to hear it. A few years back, the remaining Elder Tidecasters met Cairn in battle. Tall as 10 men, but all invincible. And I thought nothing could stop us if we stood together. Whatever. It's old history. Is everyone... I'm glad you lived through it all. I'm not, and I don't need your pity. Let us to speak of other things. What do you know of Siren? I'm sure there may be younger Archons in the historical records, but Siren is certainly an unusually powerful child. It's said half of the Scarlet Chorus were recruited by Siren's persuasive song, and I'd not doubt it. I also know the voices of Nerat put a shackle on her power, probably feared she'd become the favorite of the rabble. Let's change the subject.
Ask away.
What do you know of arcane society?
I know a great deal of the mages of the Tiers, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos' Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
Tell me of the Earthshakers. The Earthshakers are the disciples of Cairn, Archon of Stone, and they share their master's command of tremors and soil. And they also share Cairn's aloof, brooding temperament. From what I gather, the Earthshakers serve the disfavored, but the relationship has been deeply strained by Cairn's fall from grace. I could imagine there's fear Cairn shared with them something subversive or treasonous. Tell me about the Blood Chanters. The Blood Chanters are the voices of Nerat's cabal of mages. Their magic is taken from the Sigil of Siren and from techniques stolen from the School of Wild Wrath, namely their magic of fire as learned from Thousand Embers, Archon of Fire. They barely qualify as a proper school or guild. Most of them are barely literate, and I bet most of them didn't learn a damn thing, just had their knowledge shoved into their heads by Nerat. They've all the brutal buffoonery of the chorus, but with a magic to make their blood less contagious. Their only redeeming feature? Guess they make the sages seem not half bad. What can you tell me of the Forgebound? The Forgebound have an unusual sort of magic. They specialize in slow, painstaking rituals that do not produce the dazzling blasts of energy and shards of flying ice like my own magic. Instead, their spells render them immune to the fires of the forge and at one with the tools of their trade. I admit a bit of fascination with the guild. I much prefer the power and brutality of my own magic, but if I lived in a calmer, wiser time, I think there could be great satisfaction in using magic to become a master of one's craft. Tell me about the School of Ink and Quill. Behind the Tidecasters, the sages of the School of Ink and Quill are the second oldest arcane institution in the tiers. We go back a ways. There's a lot of bad blood. If I'm being objective, the sages claim to be scholars interested in collecting, archiving, and preserving lore from and for all humanity. They're quite keen to gather lore, but in no sense do they seek to share their knowledge with the tiersmen. Many of our secrets have been pilfered by the sages' spies over the centuries, and we're not alone. The sages have the secrets of many other guilds. Their generations of theft have made them versatile and dangerous. Tell me about your own guild, the School of Ties. Our patron, Occulted Jade, Archon of Tides, is as old as the settlers of the Five Wives, and for nearly 5 centuries we were masters of the coasts and rivers. These days it's a school of one. You're looking at it. She thumps her chest with a bemused smirk. Why didn't your Archon fight in the war? About a year or so before the troops arrived in the Bastard Tier, Occulted Jade proclaimed the age of the Tiers was over and said she'd depart southwest into unknown, unending ocean rather than face Kairos. Most of my guildmates went along, choosing to risk the endless high seas rather than risk battle. Few of us, the militants, as our peaceful brethren dubbed us, chose to stand and fight. To my knowledge, I'm the last of those who decided to stay and fight. What was your school like before the war? There was a time when the Tidecasters were the most powerful guild of the tiers. The Kingdom of Haven accepted us as defenders of sea trade, and the noble houses gave us peace and quiet in exchange for teaching their sons and daughters music, writing, and navigation. Though the other schools coveted our knowledge, they feared our wrath. Between our destructive magic and our Archon patron, others knew that attacking us meant suicide. How did the school fall? The Archon Cairn issued a challenge. The Masters Flovax, Hagravar, and Camberil leapt at the chance. I told them it was a hopeless clash. I think they were ready to die. As the youngest Tidecaster still in the tiers, I exercised the better part of valor and went into hiding. But then my sense of shame kicked in, and well, that's about when I fell in with the Vendrian Guard. Old as the Five Wives? By all accounts, Occulted Jade was among the initial settlers that made landfall in the tiers before Kairos first cast an edict. Though she's a bit old and stooped, she looked amazing for nearly 500. Let's change the subject.
I know a great deal of the mages of the tiers, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos' Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
What of other magical schools and guilds of the tiers? There have been several to crop up and wither across the centuries. The Cutters Guild took their healing magic north centuries ago. The School of Flowering Winter always limped along as an inconsequential group of gardeners. Most other schools in the tiers fizzled out early, slain by suspicious neighbors, or subverted and destroyed by one of the big 3 schools.
Ask away.
I'd like to ask you about our travel companions. She nods, silently awaiting your follow-up. What do you make of Barrick?
My one concern with Barrick is that he's still loyal to Graven Ash and not to you. Barrick seems steadfast, faithful, and dependable. But if it comes down to you versus Graven Ash, therein lies the test.
If it weren't a tactical asset, it'd be fun to try and pry him out of that suit. Curious to see if his midsection is as strong, firm, and taut as I've imagined it should be. What are your thoughts on Verse?
We should consider ourselves fortunate that one of the most deadly members of the Scarlet Furies considers you a suitable gang leader. That said, I think her involvement with you is entirely suspect. I would wager good money the voices of Nerat is listening through her. Or perhaps seeing what she sees.
I was going to say, knowing your reading habits, Pro, I'm surprised you're not buying this game on Steam immediately. What's your take on Lantry?
Probably the only word thief I haven't wanted to dismember. Him? I'd merely play with an ice knife.
The Wandering Scholar thing seems an act. It's always an act with the sages, always pretending to know less than they really do. I'm sure he's got 1,000 reasons for why he's not like them or more trustworthy than all the rest, but I know his type, and so I don't trust him. Oh, that's high praise coming from you. I'm going to take this staff and repeatedly jam it into your backside until you prolapse. Ah, just like that, balance has been restored to all known existence. You had me worried there. What is the appropriate color for prolapse, Pro?
Ask away.
Let's talk about something else.
What is it you need?
Let's return to our travels. Barrack loyalty ability, Iron Storm. Swords and javelins. Oh man. Swords and javelins emerge from Barrack's armor and fly into a cloud of iron above the Fatebinder. These weapons begin to rain down in a storm around the Fatebinder, damaging enemies nearby. And Terratus embrace. Ebb and the party are lifted into the sky. Ebb then radiates moonlight, healing allies and harming enemies. I should put her into the party at some point. All right, it's almost an entire stream length, and we are ready to do the. So just as a reminder, because we've got the weight of Aegis. This is a neat little pun, by the way. The weight of Aegis. Barrack wants to know if there is a way that he can be freed from his armored prison. Barrack wishes to discuss something with you, talk to him, and find out what's on his mind. So we did do the dialogue with him last stream, but we did not have the quest. So, Fatebinder, if you have a moment. Barrack stands at attention, his rigid bearing making him an unmoving statue. There have been a number of times since I came into your service in which I have not agreed fully with your choices. That said, never have I truly questioned your judgment. I hope this pattern holds after you hear the request I now make of you. If it's a hug you're looking for, I've got some bad news. No. Relax, Barrack. Just tell me what's on your mind. I hoped that perhaps the adjudicator would hear my case. What are you talking about? I have been encased in this... He wraps a gauntlet against the shards of corroded iron and bronze that sweep across his chest. Hey, Underwater Monk. Alphonse Elric. I don't think I'm familiar. Shell, since Kairos' Edict of Storms made a grave of old Stalwart. It occurred in service to the Overlord, and I would ask that the Overlord free me of its burden. Tunon can't order Kairos to take your armor off. I wasn't going to ask for the Overlord to do it personally. His metal plates grind together as he shifts. The Forgebound Guild swore its services to the Adjudicator. If any hope of my freedom from this carapace exists, it lies with them. I will happily make your case to the Archon. Thank you, Fatebinder. His salute rings like a poorly cast bell. Ah, fair enough. Not familiar, so... I eagerly await the Archon's judgment. Petition Tunon on Barrack's behalf. Barrack requested that you petition Tunon the Adjudicator to have his armor removed. Speak with Tunon at his court in the Bastard City, which is just as well because, of course, we were working on that already. Whatever you did in Ascension Hall in Vendrion's Well has given you the power to interact with the spire. Before you ascended the spire, you had a vision where the edict broke. Understanding this vision might help you better grasp this new power you have acquired. The teleporter that brought you to the top of the mountain spire in Vendrion's Well has shut off and left you stranded atop the pillar. Perhaps the strange device at its center might hold the key to activating it once again. I'm just going to take a quick second here and save as well, because we obviously did a lot of dialogue there. We don't need to overwrite. On closer inspection, a series of symbols carved around the base of the structure come into view. One symbol pulses with a blue-white glow. The pattern resembles the glowing lines of light seen on the floor of Ascension Hall, moments before you found yourself transported above the clouds. As you stare at the symbol, the chill of the wind abates and your chest swells with warmth. The air finally feels welcoming, your lungs sated at last. I'd be careful going any closer. This whole tower is humming with energies that we don't understand. Lantry holds his quill poised above a sheet of parchment with anticipation. Now, I didn't say back away. Let's find out what it does. Just be cautious. You staked your claim on the tower and everything in it. Whatever that sculpture is, it belongs to you. I feel dizzy. Do you feel dizzy? Varric massages the brow of his helmet, causing a howl of grinding iron to echo across the expanse. What is this thing? The surface of the stone edifice trembles at your words. For a brief moment, the solid rock undulates, the same motion as a quiet pond rippled by rain. An echo bounces back from afar. Your voice is distorted and unfamiliar. Is this thing? Your voice. For a moment there, it sounded like song. The sculpture is once again still. There is a rush warmth through your body, a jolt of enervation that steadies your balance. A barrage of tactile sensation floods your mind as you feel footsteps and wind, but not on your face or your limbs. A moment later, the flood of information begins to make sense. You are feeling the wind against the spire, and even the weight of your own feet, as if the spire were a second spine. With this connection made, you feel your awareness pull from this place, not as a traveler, but as one glimpsing the world from impossibly far away. In this moment, there is nothing you cannot see, though you see it nearly all at once in a flood of sensation that is difficult to parse. You see a spire at the crossing of an ancient stone structure, two walls extending off into the distance. At the base of this eternal spire, settlers and merchants act in every way unconcerned, toiling under the observation of unforgiving taskmasters. As the shadow of the spire falls over them, the mood changes. The settlers pause in shared unease and look up to the sky, toward you. Some of the faces looking at you are familiar. You recognize this place as Lethian's Crossing, where you served during the war. Near this settlement, built at the joining of ancient walls, you see a breach in the massive masonry, a cleft into the forbidden, hidden realm within the old walls. Drift closer to the spire. The spire feels similar to the one you now occupy, though instead of radiating arcane life, it reeks of dust and crumbling stone, a branch withering once pulled from its tree. It reaches for you with a barely perceptible tug. Drift into the old wall's entrance. Shadows envelop you, muting all sound and vision with slight delay. There is a feeling of perversion, of wrongness. Whatever arcane power is allowing your senses to drift free of your body seem to falter in this place. Figures haunt the stone halls, drifting emanations of cloud, claw, and fang. They pay you no heed, but you fear them all the same. In the depths of this forbidden place, the deepest chamber is bathed in light. An arcane symbol illuminates the floor, though the details hurt your eyes when you focus. With a gentle tug, your focus pulls back to a new horizon, though it takes you a moment to recognize it as Vendrion's Well. You've returned to the awareness of your immediate surroundings. The effect leaves you unsteady on your feet. The link between you and the spire recedes. The arcane bond is still present, but the mystical energies for the moment are quiet. Your body flooded with excitement and fatigue. It's unclear whether the mystic connection is strengthening you or siphoning. The tower offers nothing by way of an answer, and you know that asking would only yield more silence and mystery. The deluge of sensation is over, but the positions of the other spires still linger in your mind. From your vantage point atop the mountain spire, you can easily spot the mysterious structures, each of them rising high above their distant surroundings. Did you sense that? Lantry signs a long sigil in the air, squinting at you as he works his cantrip. The ripples are everywhere. When you move, the magic of this place stirs and churns. That portal over there, those burning braziers, they'll grow more intense as you approach. I think it's responding to your presence. Before we get ahead of ourselves, it's worth remembering that you ended Kairos' edict. That's no small feat. Maybe your connection to this place is related? Either way, sounds like something for the arcane-minded to investigate. To be sure, see me after your audience with Tunon. We cannot let the Scarlet Chorus gain hold in the tiers. Together we'll wipe them from the land. Come to me as soon as you can, Fatebinder. We have a lot of work to do. Stirring visions. Investigate the spires. You had a vision of the spires scattered across the tiers and could feel the connection between them and the spire you claimed at Vendrian's Well. Gather more information about these mysterious structures and seek them out wherever possible. Find a way to Lethian's Crossing Spire. Excuse me. You have gained access to Haven. The region's spire is attached to the old walls at Lethian's Crossing Settlement. Travel there and find a way to gain access to the spire. We already said we're going to petition Tunon. And finally, the voice of Kairos. Tunon is the voice for Kairos in the tiers, and he'll want to know the specifics of what transpired in Vendrian's Well. Travel to Tunon's court in the Bastard City. Tunon awaits your return to his court in the Bastard City. You see a bronze-clad woman in meticulously maintained attire. The leather buckles in her chest piece show fresh oil, and the scales on her armor have been neatly arranged. She gives you a quick bow as you approach. Fatebinder? Her expression is neutral, and her tone is one of forced cordiality. I am ready to serve as requested. Though the apex of old is no more, I am ready to help you find its new place in the tiers. Should you need any instruction, matters of combat, I will assist. Have you been in Apex all your life? Yes, proudly. There's no greater duty than to serve your country. Apex's challenges are many, and they are rarely addressed abroad. This valley has been assaulted time and again. What would have remained had we abstained from vigilance? What is your approach to training? Instilling resolve, first of all. We all need purpose for the fights ahead, and unless you know why you bleed on the battlefield, it will be all too easy to succumb to fear and pain. And discipline most of all. The Guard received hot-headed recruits all the time, and they would all be dead if they charged every time their blood boiled. I'd like to train. Okay, so for Solon we're going for lore. For verse, I think dual wield makes some sense here. Barrack. I'm actually trying to decide if it's better to do one-handed or parry and dodge. I think in this case we'll go for parry. And Lantry will also be lore.
Better, faster, and stronger!
Alright then. So, for verse... dual wield is... Okay. Ability and spell cooldowns, accuracy, armor, deflection. It's a tough call. I think I'm going to go a little further on finesse. And then we can go Gravedigger, sweep the target's feet, knocking them prone, allowing following downwards with strikes from each weapon. Tempted to do that. Increases weapon damage while dual wielding, and verse swaps position. Both of them are really tempting. I'll do Gravedigger. Does this mean I get to train verse one more time? Nope. The sculpture doesn't respond to your touch. Alright, straight to the back. Actually, you know what? I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to see Ascension Hall, so... Are you sure you want to instantly teleport from the mountain? Wait a minute, can I instantly teleport to the Bastard City? No. Or do you want to instantly teleport from the Mountain Spire to Ascension Hall? Yes. I don't think there will be much in the hall, but... Now, actually, this is a question for those of you familiar with CRPGs. I know Pillars of Eternity had a case where you would maintain a fortress, but was that something that you could do in Baldur's Gate or Baldur's Gate 2? I'm not actually sure where that convention came from. All that remains on the plates and in the goblets are molded bits of bread and dingy water. A decent meal hasn't been had in this room for a long time. The intricacies of this architecture suggest a master craftsmanship that is far beyond what one would expect from a normal tiersman. The stone throne is caked with a solid layer of dust. No one has sat upon it for quite some time. Okay, so I didn't explore the whole map, it turns out.
Would you take a look at that?
Aha! Kind of glad I chose to go the long way around. Before I go too much further, let's get the goodies inside here. I guess we were kind of running from battle to battle, so I didn't loot the place. Iron gauntlets can be created with access to a Spire Forge upgrade and proper materials. Okay. Following Kairos' conquest, food has become far less plentiful in the tiers. The Vendrian Guard must make do with very little. Bloodstains litter the training grounds. Vendrian Guard trainees spar in this area, perfecting their martial craft. These small barracks are nowhere near large enough to keep the Vendrian Guard comfortable and well rested. Sleeping occurs in short shifts, with soldiers rotating in and out of beds. I'm not sure if I need to activate the books, but I figure I might as well. I'll finish my exploring and then we'll see what's in the inventory. The central spire stretches into the clouds, towering at a height that is difficult to comprehend. From here, it appears completely unassailable.
Good thing I keep a torsion wrench handy.
This damage
There.
dates back
See
to
that?
Kairos' initial conquest of the tiers. That is one of the few blemishes remaining. Sorry, that it is one of the few blemishes remaining is testament to the Vendrian Guard's reconstruction efforts. So right now we're just looting the place, but we will go to Tunon as quickly as possible. I also wasn't really paying attention. There are little indications. I think these are rings showing when I can pick things up, so I don't have to constantly hold down the show me the items button. Probably wouldn't hurt for me to follow the environment, though. Alright, so I'm just going to unlock a little bit more of the map. I'm not going to do like the full area here, but just make sure there's nothing in the... Oh, there is. So, before we go to Tunon, I'm just going to take one more moment to work out... what is this? Dire Remedy. Okay. So I'm going to take a minute here just to see if we can better equip my people. So first of all, weapons. Sort my item type. Okay, so there's definitely things Barrick might find useful. I don't really need a staff. I mean, I've already got a staff here, so... I suppose there may be something to be said for, yeah, so... Pill of Courage... immunity to Frightened... Staff of Boreal Frost... Yeah, so I mean, at the very least, this is a direct upgrade. So Bronze Greatsword, I mean, really at this point I'm just looking at the DPS. Iron, a better armor penetration, but still not enough on the DPS side. And now we're on to one-handed weapons. For Verse, so slightly different story on one-handed weapons, but what have we got here? Still two-handed. Okay, Rot and Ruin. Nope. I feel this one in particular I want to be focusing on DPS. Okay, so this is interesting. If I switch out Gut Seeker... It's a little weird to see her going with blunt weapons, but... Let's give it a shot. So if I take Gut Seeker and switch it out here... And then I take the Bronze Mace. Again, incredibly strange, but it really does do quite a bit. I mean, I guess it depends whether or not we run into anybody who is resistant to Crush. Oh yeah, I don't think we were doing armor yet. Barrick. Okay, so first of all, we want to see if this is better than the Disfavored Shield. Better parry, not as good for dodge. Better endurance. Yeah, it's let's say it's not a dominant difference. So it's not as good armor penetration. I also forgot to test the bow, sorry. Better DPS, but worse recovery, though. And accuracy. So we used to have Rot and Ruin. Yeah, not super convinced compared to the Twisted Iron Sword, so... Lantry, it's really hard for me to see how I'll find a replacement for Lantry's Quill. I mean, maybe some of these Javelins, but... the alternative here would be the Earthshaker Staff, but then the question is, like, what what even is the alternative to that? Because I think there's also a I think there is like a there's a I actually haven't I really haven't worked with the stabs, so maybe what I'll do is I'll experiment with Lantry's use later on. I'll probably also start holding off on selling some of this stuff because I have other party members now who I haven't properly outfit yet. All right, on to armor. So, heavy armor right now is a non-starter. Yeah, this counts as light, so... I don't hate these, but I think I prefer the boost from Commander's Will. Okay, verse. Hats. No. Light leather boots work. That's all I've got there, though. Barrack doesn't need the armor. And Lantry, I'm not expecting miracles, but... I don't hate blood-soaked boots, so what's the story here with the Scholar's boots? I'm going to hold off now just because I think the recovery is relevant, but... Okay, and then I don't think I have trinkets, but... Oh, hang on. Locked Iron Gauntlet. This old book is fragile and hard to read, but there are legible plans in it for locked iron gauntlets. This item can be created with access to a Spire Forge upgrade and proper materials. And dagger plans. These partial plans describe the process for creating a powerful weapon, but more research is needed to fill the gaps in the plan. This research will be made with a Spire library upgrade and the proper materials. So yeah, not much we can do about that. Alright, this works for me. To the Bastard City. Tunon's court. When the Bastard City fell to Kairos' armies, Tunon the Adjudicator, Archon of Justice, claimed the palace for his own. Now Tunon's court serves as the center of law and governance for the Tiers. It'll take 1 day, 17 hours, and 45 minutes to show up. Encounter in Vendrian's Well. You make out a few figures on the road well ahead of you. The glint of iron and bronze marks them as well-armed and armored. 2 feature broad shoulders of beastmen haulers and lead a heavy laden cart. As they near, you realize the standard flown from the cart boasts the heraldry of Tunon the Adjudicator, Archon of Justice. They'll hail you as you approach. You recognize the woman who leads the procession as a minor functionary in Tunon's service by the name of Alma. Her clothes bear the black, red, and gold of the court, and she keeps her light brown hair in a carefully braided bun atop her head. Speak with them. Feybinder Solon, she greets you with a bow. I travel in the Archon's service. The cart behind me is laden with supplies, all at a reasonable price. Is there anything I can provide you? Shop. Alma grins. Of course, let me show you what I have. She pulls the cover off her cart with a flourish. Alright, I can't see myself buying any of these, but I can see myself selling a few things. Okay, so definitely the Broken Falcons. Definitely remember to read that. I think I'm going to hang on to all of these. Right now with my characters, I can't see myself... So let's say Solon and Barrick theoretically, but the other two, so yeah, heavy bronze armor. You can definitely give up 2 there. Don't know why. Superior quality. Okay. I'll hang on to those 2. Heavy leather boots, horde boots. These are effectively the same. Okay, so can't say any of the daggers have been required yet. I'm still trying to keep a couple of options open, but I don't want to... I also don't want to hoard too much. Alright, I think I'm reasonably happy with that as a clearing out of the inventory without completely emptying my options. Once I have a clearer idea in terms of sort of how I'm building characters, I'll do it. But like right now, I'm not super clear in terms of some trade-offs in terms of what I get and what I'm giving up. So. Tunon's court is in session. Approach him and tell him what happened at Vendrian's Well. Kairos' standard, an imposing sight for both conquered and unconquered alike. Lady Lucretius, this well-dressed older woman stands apart from the milling crowds of nobles. She stares off into the distance, oblivious to your approach until you're right in front of her. Oh, greetings, she offers a reserved smile. Anda Lucretius, formerly of Thistleholm. You have the look of someone who belongs here. A fate-binder, no doubt, she nods. Do you need something from me? What are all of these nobles doing in Tunon's court? She smirks and shakes her head. Trying to look brave, I warrant, but if you crane an ear to any of their conversations, you'll hear a different tale. 3 years since Tunon set up shop in the Bastard City, we're still getting used to our new masters and figuring out what we can and can't ask of them. She nods to the assembled nobles. These are smart, ring-plenty folk. The way they approach Tunon, you'd think they were raised under a tyrant's lash. Some have come to settle a grievance, others to pledge fealty. I've been standing around long enough to know that the adjudicator doesn't care for empty gestures. How has the Bastard City fared since the conquest? The armies claim the city in a quieter, more organized manner than I might have expected. I can credit them that much, to be sure. Thanks to Chorus infiltrators, most of our officials were put to the sword before we surrendered. The chaos made the takeover easy for Kairos' forces, but controlling the city without any leaders to bend the knee was harder work. We've suffered our share of hardships, but it seems that Kairos wants us alive. That's a more generous outcome than some of us were led to believe. What brings a noble like yourself to Tunon's court? A frown cracks her pleasant demeanor. Like the rest of the frightened inbreds here, I came to see Tunon and ask him to right a wrong. My manor was destroyed during the conquest. I told the adjudicator my woes, but we didn't exactly see eye to eye. Tell me of yourself. I'm the daughter of a noble house. We were wealthy enough to live in the city, but our means beyond that were limited. My mother dealt in fish, textiles, and bronze. By the time I inherited, the business was taking care of itself. She sighs. Of course, all of that changed. Thistleholm is no more, and my name has none of its former weight. Even if we were still in business, Kairos' laws would stifle our trading rights. Among other things, Kairos' law of quota and sharing meticulously regulates tradable goods. Permits are issued to deserving merchants on an annual basis, but their allowances circulate by a design known only to Kairos and Tunon. A former wool peddler may be restricted to selling only copper, and the subsequent year trade fresh vegetables. God, sounds like a Bernie Sanders approach. Perhaps it's better this way. What is Thistleholm? A great sigh deflates her. It was my family's ancestral hall. The oldest stones dated back to the years when the bastard city was naught but a dozen roofs and wagons clustering for warmth. Compared to the houses of the great lords, it was nothing special. Age had softened the wood, and its queer placement in the warehouse district set it apart from the finer grounds where lords and ladies strolled for amusement. It was a mess, but our mess all the same. I would invite you over for tea, something stronger even, but it would only disappoint. You'll find naught there but a gaping hole. What happened? Collateral damage happened. When the adjudicator cast his judgment on the bastard city, he destroyed the districts of the corrupt merchant kings, their manors, their counting houses, and yes, their warehouses. Aged, dignified Thistleholm collapsed as a massive sinkhole opened under her foundation. The bastard city's laws may not have been perfect by Kairos' standards, but my family followed them with respect and never took a copper ring more than we deserved. I can't help but feel that my estate was not the criminal Tunon had in mind during his sentencing. So what are you going to do next? That's the question, isn't it? I appealed to the adjudicator, thinking he would see reason. After considering my case for all of 8 seconds, he awarded me a belt of rings and a plot of land on the outskirts of the city. Tunon told me to build anew and start farming. Farming? Can you believe that? She shakes her head. I'm not even that opposed to the labor, but we're in a war. I can't have the Scarlet Chorus breathing down my neck, raiding my crops, and Kairos knows what else. Kairos' laws are made to serve the masses, not just the individual. I can appreciate that, especially when there's suffering or corruption on a grand scale. It all makes sense on parchment, doesn't it? She glances to the left and right with unease. I come from a long line of smart, ring-savvy merchants, but even I can't reconcile Tunon's justice with Kairos' law. There is something wrong about it all. Maybe Tunon knows something I don't. Or maybe... She trails off, shaking her head in doubt. You presume to know more of justice than the adjudicator? No, it's not that at all. I'm saying I don't understand Kairos' law as well as I thought I did. Maybe none of us do. People come here for justice. They usually get a version of it, but it's Tunon's version, not theirs. Half of the time, they don't even get what they wanted out of a ruling in their favor. She shakes her head. Deed to a farm, for instance. Not to put my own ignorance on display, but if more people knew how Kairos' laws work, they might not come here seeking a ruling at all, even a fair one. Tunon is a servant of law, but he's the Overlord's vassal as much as any of us. Sometimes it seems like he uses his position to twist everything in the Empire's favor. We're just pieces on a board, and he can move us wherever the law justifies that we stand. That doesn't sound, well, legal. Fascinating. Now, how much is my silence worth to you, ungrateful one? Can only endeavor to bring true justice to the joke. Kairos defines law. That isn't for either of us to question. She sighs. I suppose not. The bastard city used to have the laws of woman and mankind, but now we have the laws of the Overlord. The people will get accustomed to it in time, and so will I. Good day, Fatebinder. That is also a neat one to start. I have gotten to this part of the game before, but I don't remember it very well. So I thought this is kind of an interesting one because it's just an indicator of... So one, we obviously had a part in taking down the city, but it's also just kind of interesting to see the nobility sort of trying to adapt to this radical change in their circumstances. Any petitioners that displeased Tunon would meet their fate in the pits below the court.
You call yourselves officers of Kairos' army, but your conduct falls short of my expectations. The court finds your accounts of Vendrian's well lacking, rife with misdirection and fallacy, fouled with baseless accusation.
The shadows beneath Tunon's court darken and flare around him. Murmurs of unease erupt in the court. Listen. Your Honor, I have relayed the events as I experienced them. You can well imagine why my version conflicts with his. She makes a dismissive gesture to the Scarlet Chorus representative. On my honor, and on that of the great general, I would sooner snap my sword than perjure myself before you, Archon. Or so you imply that falsehood comes easier to my lips than yours? You're a fool if you believe the Archon of Justice won't see through your lies because the disfavored think themselves better than an honest gang.
Silence. The contradictions in your statements will be examined, and falsities threshed from truths. If we find you have perjured yourselves, Bled and Mark will see to your fate.
The Archon turns, and you feel his gaze upon you.
Fatebinder, we will start with the matter of the Archons. Graven Ash and the Voices of Nerat have declared war upon each other. In addition to violating Kairos' peace, they have thrown the conquest of the Tears into disarray. By all accounts, these hostilities began shortly after your arrival. Tell us what transpired.
I'm actually not 100% sure on this one, so the Archons could not agree on who should lead the siege and descended into accusations of treachery. It seemed a mutual spat, or the Archons have been different minds since the start of this war. So I'm trying to remember specifically what treachery the Voices of Nerat accused Graven Ash of, but I'll say the Archons could not agree. The disfavored were more deserving of the honor. Our tactics and training outmatched the Vendrian Guard at every turn. What balderdash! The disfavored couldn't tip over a straw hut if they had a week to strategize. Our hauling mob was better equipped to overwhelm the Vendrian Guard. Our recruits were ready to throw themselves at the enemy, if only Ash and his legion would agree to a plan.
The Fatebinder presents testimony. I warn you both against speaking out of turn. Something more than a mere disagreement unraveled this campaign, but I will return to that in time. Let us speak of Ascension Hall. The disfavored sing your praises across the realm, though the Scarlet Chorus appeal for charges of treason. Perhaps you can offer a more enlightened account.
I claim the Citadel with a small unit of disfavored.
An efficient solution, the type I would expect from a capable agent. Tell me, though, with the edict looming overhead and death the price of failure, why not employ the numerical advantage of the Scarlet Chorus?
So the Voices of Nerat provoked Ash at every turn. I suspected treachery, or the siege called for tactics and planning, not raw numbers. This is more consistent with what I said at the time, and I want to make sure that I'm giving an honest account to Tunon. The siege called for tactics and planning, not raw numbers. For a long while, the adjudicator hovers in silence, shadows trailing from below his robes.
I will consider this testimony at length. The court thanks you for it. Is there anything you wish to add at this time?
I have told you all that I know.
Your testimony is accepted by the court. The statements of our guests raise questions in my mind. There is much about this campaign that has caused me to wonder. A shipment of iron weapons was short on arrival. Where coveted iron is concerned, I don't believe it to be a clerical error. One of my agents recovered this seal in Echo Call. It belongs to a merchant collective. Lethian's Crossing is teeming with their kind. If you would root out treachery, I would advise starting there. Petitioners, leave us. I would have a private audience with the Fatebinder. Ascend and join me. You will find the way opened.
Tunon has summoned you to a private audience. He awaits you on the terrace above this court in the Bastard City.
Will do.
The ornament atop of the throne resembles Tunon's mask. It always seems to meet your gaze, regardless of where you are standing. Now, I will show you the biggest reason why I like Big Head mode. Just something very amusing when it's Tunon.
This civil war, this feud, is an insult to Kairos' peace. It should not have taken the better part of a year to silence the last vestiges of the Oathbreakers.
Tunon regards you in thoughtful silence. I agree, Your Honor.
Our allies squabble while our enemies regroup. It falls upon the court to measure the extent of the damage, and to execute the agents of disorder. I suspect that treachery, negligence, disunity, and greed have infected one or both of our esteemed allies. Until you are instructed otherwise, this matter is the court's primary focus. Graven Ash and the voices of Nerat must be examined in close detail. You are charged with observing the Archons and presenting your case that one of them has wrought chaos and disorder upon the Tiers.
Could they both be guilty?
It's possible, but the momentum of the conquest up to this point suggests otherwise. The failure at Vendrian's Well implies a coordinated will behind the chaos. As always, you will be held accountable for what you do in the court's name. But you are free to conduct your investigation in the manner of your choosing. You must expect lies, misdirection, and manipulation. Suffer not such obstructions of justice. The disfavored seem the logical first step in your inquiry. The Legion holds you in some esteem, and Graven Ash has shown deference to the court in times past. No doubt the disfavored will be rife with accusations and evidence against the voices of Nerat. Graven Ash is a noble man, but never underestimate his capacity for deception. A wise general succeeds by knowing when to be unreadable to the enemy. You should, of course, speak with the Scarlet Chorus and gather their testimony. But it stands to reason that most in the chorus would sooner brag about a pauldron fashioned from your skull than entertain your questions. Do not regret killing the rabble that impede your investigation. They will be easily replaced.
I'll speak with the Archon of War.
Your fellow Fatebinders have been busy acting as my eyes and ears. I have a few leads for you to follow. You should, of course, speak with your brothers and sisters of the court if you need further counsel. The disfavored have made use of the Sage's network of dovecotes and messenger birds as they come under capture. I've heard multiple claims of strategic communications gone missing. The Sages are broken, their citadel in flames, but they were not slaughtered to the last. Some of their numbers still congregate around the smoking husk of their burning library. If they have been reading disfavored communications, learn what they learned, then execute them. The Oathbreakers were reported to be using iron armaments, more than they might acquire from looting what few disfavored they killed. Any iron in the tiers not rusted through was made by forge-bound hands in Lethian's Crossing. Between craftsman and quartermaster, someone let iron fall into enemy hands. Investigate this matter and bring the thieves to justice. There is a final matter to discuss. A sensitive topic.
Though it's impossible to gauge from his expression, Tunon seems more wary than usual. What concerns the court, Your Honor?
In spite of the many shortcomings at Vendrian's Well, you managed to make a name for yourself. You proclaimed an Edict of Kairos, resolved its demanding conditions, and ascended the mountain spire. Any one of these feats would be worthy of recognition by the highest authority. You managed to accomplish 3.
I am in a privileged position to accomplish incredible deeds.
It pleases me that you grasp your role, as long as you temper it with a sense of duty. Whether by design or by accident, you have captured the attention of Kairos' army and the local tiersmen alike. This is no small opportunity, and the court charges you with exploiting your new standing to its fullest potential. You have a title in our hierarchy. However, it's a little-known secret that one's standing in the world is determined by their infamy, their deeds, and how they come to be known. Mind this notion as you bring justice to this lawless frontier. There may come a time when your deeds speak for you louder than any title. Whatever you did to capture the attention of the masses at Vendrian's Well, I would encourage you to do so again.
Understood. I will be known as a champion of justice.
Good. It falls to us to set a new standard for these southern barbarians. You are dismissed. Should the court have need of your presence, you will receive word. Go forth and do my bidding, and bring glory and honor to the tears in Kairos' name.
Tunon raps his gavel against the floor, the singular note resounding throughout the hall. Let's see if this ticks by. Cool. Okay, so Stirring Visions, we've already done the Weight of Aegis, actually. Let's see if we can plead Barrick's case. You return. It is gratifying to see that the war has not caused you to forget your roots. What is it you wish to know? Actually, have a nice stream. Actually, I was going to say, I'd like to, again, I kind of mow the lawn as far as this. I'll say no more questions, then be on your way. I'm actually going to save here and say it's probably time for me to wrap up, too. It's mostly just because I don't think I'm going to recover from that have a nice stream. But this seems like a good enough place to stop because it's quite late and we did get 3 hours in. So I realize I spent a lot of time talking, doing the dialogue, and some of the discussion was less about the game. Now the good news is that most of the dialogue with the characters is done. This of course doesn't mean. Oh, sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to do. Oh, hello. House seal. The seal was made with care and attention to detail. You recognize its sigil from the merchant house of Handover Quill. Sigil of Frostfire. This scroll contains a magical accent which fuses the cores of frost and fire together. Almost. But yeah, I figure, I mean, again, it's nice to just be able to talk about the things. I do like that it did sort of touch on some of the ideas and themes on the game, but definitely my intention will be the next time we play, which will most likely be Monday. We'll maybe make a little bit more progress towards the main quest. So I figured having a chat with Tunon and then the other Fate Binders would be a good way of sort of starting off the stream. Now, again, this is kind of my last chance to set expectations for the upcoming weeks and such. So I do plan on streaming on Monday and Wednesday at least in the coming week. However, I have a flight basically, Friday is going to be a very busy day for me, and then I have my flight. Basically, I start my overseas travels second week of August. So I want to allow for the possibility that I'll need to, I'll need the extra day for myself. I actually have a lot of stuff I need to do for prepping. I think I need to get a bigger suitcase just because it's a longer stay. Now, my original plan was to try and record some stuff in advance for the trip. But in addition to all the stuff that I need to do, getting hit by the car has really ruined those plans. So I really don't know what I'll have content-wise. What I might try and do while I'm traveling, if I get a chance to do something with my phone, I'll maybe try and do those. But at this point here, I think it would be fair to say that after next week, don't expect any streams until September, for which I apologize, and I'll try and do what I can to make up for the streams. But the other thing is just even in terms of YouTube, I'm really struggling to work out the to even just get my like normal videos in, let alone prepare all the other things. The accident really did just completely throw me off in terms of scheduling. But we'll do our best. And again, thank you everybody for watching. I do like this, so I'm interested in seeing where it all goes. But I do need to make sure that I'm getting some kind of rest, even on the weekends. So sorry, just taking a minute here to see who I can host. And let's host Will Shand again. Thank you, Index Gnome, and good luck with the rest of your game. If you don't mind, I would love to know more about what you do with your maps and related endeavors. Anyway, I'm going to host Will Shand again. I know Kilgore Trout is also streaming, but I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Will Shand with his games and demos and his unusual styles. Revive Snow, always a pleasure. Thank you for hanging out. Good luck with your masters in real-time strategy. I will see you all on Monday, I suppose. Take care.
Really? Okay, is that a horse? Yo, 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 System Shock. System Shock, hey, hey, hey. Thank you for the raid. How you doing today? Welcome in, welcome in. Save the best game for last. How was Tyranny? Still in pain, but less than before. Oh, I'm glad you're feeling a bit better. Everyone spam some love in the chat for System Chalk. And this game is chess? Is this game for smart people? Yeah, I don't know if I have to actually play a game of chess in this game or not. I know how to play chess. I'm not good at playing chess, though. Hey, 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 fried and butter. Okay, I think this is a good place to stop with the weird chess. Oh, what's this here? Let's take a look for a second. Do the Riker maneuver. There's a slot here. It looks like something can be inserted, and it's vaguely reminiscent of a picture frame.